Board 6, the Business Affairs and Street Activities Committee meeting. My name is Kyle Vide and I'm the chair. The time is 7:10. John will be taking the minutes for tonight's meeting. The agendas for tonight's meeting has been distributed. If you don't have one, please talk to Cody. He'll give you an agenda. There's some up here as well.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to quickly run through tonight's agenda. Please indicate if you're here by just saying present. Is 164 East 56th Street here?
Present.
Thank you. Numero 28?
Present.
Thank you. Chateau 49?
Present.
Thank you. Ben and Jack's?
Present.
Thank you. 151 East 57th?
Here.
New York Cruise Jewel? New York Cruise Cabana? And King Jane Garden?
Present.
Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to adopt that agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. The minutes from our, is there a motion to adopt the minutes from our April meeting?
So moved.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Seeing no objections. So for those who are new here, we're going to go one by one through this agenda. Please come up to the front and speak into the mic that we have up here. Not only present to the committee, but please present to the public as well, because it's open to the public's comment as well. If you have copies of your application, please give them to the committee before you begin speaking. So first up, can we have 164 East 56?
I'm going to ask all of you to clearly identify yourselves and your relationship to the petitioner.
Hello, my name is Yuri Choi, and I am an attorney from the attorney's office that is handling the liquor license
Could you spell your
application.
name, please?
Oh, sure. It's E-U-R-I-E. Last name is Choi. C-H-O-I.
A choice between an O or Y.
The applicant's name, the corporation name is A&L of NY Corp. I think when we submitted the 30-day notice, we did not have a DBA submitted yet, but they did file one, and so I put it on top of the cover page. It's Izakaya Tori Bar. They're planning on opening a small Japanese restaurant at 164 East 56th Street, which is between Lexington and 3rd. This place used to be I think it was some sort of a jazz bar, small type of jazz bar serving Peruvian food. So they had an on-premise liquor license. I'm not sure when they closed, but their liquor license expired in 2013. So it's been a while since there was something there. But we just got countersigned leases back the other day, and they're planning on doing all the renovations. So hopefully they'll be open in a few months. The liquor license will probably take just as long, so probably open around the same time. Like I said, it's a small Japanese restaurant. They're planning on doing all the renovations to have about 12 tables. They do a lot of gutting. There's like a bar and a stage area. They're removing all of that, putting in the tables, about 12 tables, 2 seats at each table. There's a copy of the menu in there. It's going to be, in addition to a small selection of sashimi, they're planning on serving a variety of kind of fried foods, almost like street foods, but fancy Japanese foods. Different fried seafoods, different soups, things like that. And then a small selection of drinks, which is why they're looking for their liquor license, to just serve a couple drinks to complement their menu. That's pretty much it.
This is going to be more casual. Oops, sorry.
What are the hours of operation, please?
They're planning on opening at 11 in the morning to cover lunch, and then closing at midnight every night.
So 7 days a week?
Yes.
11 a.m. to 12
Yes.
7 days a week.
And is this more formal dining, casual?
It'll be more casual, much more casual. Little finer dining, I suppose, compared to just I don't know, getting ramen or something, which can be fancy, but but still casual. And before the premises, but it's very old and it has 5 males listed as the capacity. We are working with our architect to get a letter of no objection. We can submit that to you if you would like. When we get it.
The more paper, the better.
Okay, yeah, so we'll send that on to you when we get that.
And can you tell us a little bit about the operators? Have they operated previous establishments? Have they had any issues?
They have not actually operated a specific restaurant like this, but he's planning on hiring like employees from the same industry. He has like family and friends that have done it, not him himself. So when you look at his resume, he's actually more into like, he has like a film company. But he wants to get into the restaurant business, starting off a little smaller, but he's going to get all the help that he can get to make sure that everything runs smoothly, any problems are taken care of.
I may have missed this, but what is the occupancy? How many people can it hold?
Well, the official CO is for 5 males, but.
Oh, I meant what are you trying to get it to?
Oh, probably around 25 to 30, just to cover all the tables and then all the
Okay.
staff and like a little cushion just in case.
No, that's fair. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what was this before? What was this most recently?
Like a jazz bar.
Just trying to-
As it was occupied, I think it looks like it's been empty for a
Yeah,
while,
I'm
from what I
trying to, I live in the
understand.
neighborhood, so I'm trying to envision what was there.
Yeah.
I can't.
Like if you look at
I usually
like the
can.
pictures that we submitted in there, it shows like the front doors, they put their sign up, it's like, almost like a plywood
Yeah.
looking door.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
there's a lot of renovations that need to be done to it.
Do you have an expectation on when you'd be opening? Or a goal?
Our goal would be probably mid to late summer, but that is depending on all the construction going according to plan, which is always up in the air. And then I think they would like to open with their liquor license in place. And I think it's been taking a while to get the licenses like fully issued, so we'll see.
And with the issue of construction, has there been any outreach to the surrounding residents in case of disturbances or inconveniences to their quality of life?
Not yet, because we just signed a countersigned lease, so we just signed the lease, so we didn't want to step over the landlord's feet or anything. But we don't anticipate it being like crazy renovation. There is another commercial space in the area, so it's not just like we're the only one in the building, so I think.
Yeah, just because like we've received a lot of issues with other establishments regarding construction and just even with city construction as well, impeding on people's sort of quality of life and how that affects the businesses, which then affects relationships with residents. So just something to keep in mind as well.
We will definitely keep in mind to be open to any residents. If anyone has any complaints, we'll definitely address them.
And did you say there's another business in the building?
Yeah, I think it's some sort of salon, like waxing eyebrows type of thing. Not like a restaurant or anything, just like another commercial business.
My wife goes there. I'll ask her.
So are there any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion of this applicant? So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Those abstaining? Those abstaining for cause? All right, congrats.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Numero 28. No, that was in case there are any changes.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
My name is Michael Kelly, representing the applicant. This is an on-premise liquor license application for an entity to be formed by Remo Biamonte, located at 947 2nd Avenue between East 50th and East 51st Street, and the premises formerly occupied by La Mediterranee Restaurant. They had an on-premise liquor license and leaving 8 feet. So we'd be using less than half the site.
So it'll probably go right down.
It'd be less than 2 flags.
So it'll be 1.5 flags.
Yes. Flags are 5 feet. I think what Matisse used to do is those planters used to come out and probably take up
And
a
then
little more
on
sidewalk.
the Second Avenue side, it's 15 feet as well, and they're only coming out. You're only coming out 5 feet. How
Yes.
is there? How are you only coming out 5 feet here, but you're coming out 7 here?
Because we're using this as the 3-foot way service style instead of coming out here to do it.
Got it. So that leaves 10.
That leaves 10 there.
Okay.
Do you want to look at the numbers?
Yeah. It's actually easier to see 49th Street from here too. And the one thing I would note is that if they're gonna come out, this is a street, not an avenue, so
Yeah.
there'll probably be less pedestrian foot traffic
Yeah.
there than there would be on the avenue. My concern would be more
Yeah.
Second
Yeah.
Avenue, because you know the property
Yeah.
better.
That's one of the reasons we didn't
Yeah.
come out with
Yeah.
7 feet there.
That makes sense
That
to
we're
me.
using the weight service island.
Mhm.
This is
And the waiters are gonna serve these tables from this door. This is gonna be
Yeah,
separate.
so there will
service
not,
from
there'll
here.
be no wrap.
Nobody's gonna be walking around here.
Got it. No, that makes sense.
Those tables on 49th will be right under the window of the people living on the second and third floor.
Yes, and I'll also be under the awning.
Right.
And Florian's worked there for about 8 years as a manager, so.
What are the hours?
So 11:30 to 2 a.m. Noon to 2 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, noon to 3 a.m. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and 11:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. on Sunday.
So 3 a.m.?
Those are the interns.
The bar.
Inside.
I just asked the same question. I just said no.
Sorry.
No, I'll keep them closed at 11.
Yeah, so I would just be wary of the foot traffic because especially on Second Avenue and in this particular neighborhood too, because we have the 50th and the 54th Street areas, where there have been a lot of obstructions, particularly with
We
with
talked
parents,
about
the
that.
carriages,
Yeah.
and people who are disabled and the elderly too, just having issues because of the creep of sidewalk cafes. So with that also with the A signs, we've been seeing a lot of
Yeah,
the A
A-signs.
signs. We can't have any of those A signs out as well because those are also obstructing people's pedestrian space.
That's why we kept this limited on Second Avenue.
Yeah.
There's a very popular Mexican restaurant on that same block, 49th Street.
It's on between 49th and 48th.
Mhm.
Bar Natural,
Yes, yeah. They have a pretty wide
They do.
avenue,
They do.
operation there. Can we just look at the prior, go down 49th Street so I can see the side of the building? Because there are two doors. There's one, there's the service door there, and then there's the door to the restaurant. Neither one of those doors, these tables are gonna be congregated between those doors?
No, here's the service door right here,
Uh-huh.
and this is the residential entrance, and this is the
We'll stop by
That's
there.
the avenue.
Last, right?
Yes.
So one, two,
Yeah, so we're staying on this side of the
The
door.
tables are similar.
Staying on this side, we didn't put any tables here, they'd be too close to the residents.
Yeah.
We have barriers on the other side?
The small ones, yes.
Yeah, on that side.
Yes. We have to keep people from leaving without them.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Please state your name and
Glenn
relation to the
Cosman,
neighborhood.
I'm president of the board of directors of the Leslie House on East 54th Street. So just as a community question, so your tables are basically 2 feet wide?
22 inches by 24.
Okay.
Pretty
Uh,
close.
Glenn, we're gonna ask you to.
So they're about around 2 feet, and you'll go out two rows, basically.
Yes, so they'll come out 22 inches, we'll have a 3-foot weight service aisle, 22 inches, and then the barrier will be 2 inches, this way we're a little bit under the 7 feet.
The only concern from a community place is people hate sitting close to each other, and people inevitably move things over. It's just what it always happens. What are you gonna do to prevent that? Because you're gonna start impinging on 49th and on Second Avenue.
We're gonna have the barrier set up, so the waiters and the servers know exactly where it's supposed to be, and we can always put tape on the ground and make sure it's set up, but the sizing of the barriers will come out to 7 feet and go to length, this way we would know right away if it moved.
And then also with the outdoor cafe, I know with the outdoor seating, you don't serve after 11, but can you drink out there after 11?
You're gonna mean it turning into a bar scene?
Well, just,
Yeah.
coming out, people love to come out and have a cocktail.
If you're basically not eating, you're not coming out there just to drink.
Okay, so
Yes.
you won't live there. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
It's more of a dining thing, it's a neighborhood place, we
I'm familiar with
we
it.
don't want people getting drunk and disturbing everyone else.
Perfect. Exactly.
No, go ahead.
Are there any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion? So I can't make a motion, so just, when it comes out to second, I can do it. So, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, those abstaining for calls. Congrats.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Everybody
you.
else.
Next up is Ben and Jack's.
Hi, good evening.
How are you?
My name is James Wanderstock, and we're the attorneys for the applicant, Ben Jacks. And I have with me Russ Sinanaj, one of the principals, to answer any specific.
Could you spell your name, please?
Sure. W-A-N, D for David, E-R-S-T-O-C-K. This Ben and Jack's has been open now about a year and a half, and ironically they were at the same location in 2005. They had like a 7 or 8 year run, and then the entire building was taken down and rebuilt over a 3-year period. So it's actually part of, there's a hotel just towards the 3rd Ave side. You can see that's their entrance. The hotel entrance here.
So what's the alteration?
Now, all that they're doing is they're adding 16 seats in the front of the premises, within the building line. So it'll be about 8 tables, each with 2 seats. It's actually right here. I have a plan here that shows it. That's the front.
Got it. And currently it's how many tables?
4 tables, isn't it?
Well, it'll be probably 8.
8 tables.
8 tables.
So you're doubling what's
Oh,
on this, right?
Well, I think it's, I don't.
Oh, each or 2?
Yeah.
Okay. And that will all go within the building line, correct?
Yeah, that's what the end. So, but yeah, the end of the line, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And what are the hours of operation?
The hours will be basically 11 in the morning until 12 midnight during the week. And then on Friday and Saturday, they may go until 1 a.m. depending on business.
So
Well, what are you applying for?
That's who we are.
Till 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, so 11 to midnight, Sunday through Thursday,
Right.
and then 11 to 1 Friday and Saturday.
It's across the street. Help on that.
What's across the street?
I think this, the new building,
Oh, this one, okay.
Most of the
yeah, it's,
You're the best.
Still
Done.
no change.
It looks like there's something like a lounge up on top anyway, right? Up there, so you see some tables.
yeah, that's fantastic.
That's
That's
It's called Evening Hotel.
Ask a clarifying question, so this is not like a separate sidewalk?
No. No, it's just north of the sidewalk. It's within the building line.
Oh, it's really
So it won't go past that demarcation over there.
Right.
And currently you have 4 tables, you said?
I think it's going to be 8.
No, currently you have 6, right?
6 tables.
4, 6. Yeah, so they're just adding 2.
Two.
Yeah. So yeah, I couldn't tell on this, but each of these are 2.
Two.
Yeah. Alright. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the public on this applicant? Seeing none? Make a motion to object. I'll second John. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Those abstaining for cause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So 151 East 57. Next up.
My name is Alden Baxter, A-L-D-E-N, B-A-X-T-A-R. I'm one of the senior partners for 151E57. We'll be doing business under the name of Side Door on 57th Street between Lexington Avenue and 3rd Avenue. Pretty much will be a sports type bar. We have 20 seats at the bar. We will have 10 2-seat tables, 7 4-seat tables inside. It's a casual setting, a casual atmosphere. It's a mixed cuisine, not nothing specific, not Spanish, not Italian, just a lot of mixed different type of tapas plates. The previous occupant was La Pulperia. I believe they were a Spanish restaurant. I believe they closed in either late January, early February. We do plan on changing the facade to have open type windows. They will be closed by 10 o'clock each night. We do plan on being 7 days a week. Our operating hours, we're looking at 11:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. We plan on serving lunch and dinner. What am I missing here? I have actually spoken to a lot of people in the neighborhood who are pretty excited that something else is coming back in there, so they're anticipating our opening. We do plan on trying to open by August 1st, with that being really the only construction work that we have to do. We're just taking on the space that was as it was. So the windows and some slight floor repairs for warped floorboards.
And you're right next to the Colonial.
Exactly. It's sidebar. It's the same owner owns both buildings. It is just a 3-story building, just offices above us. Across the street, there's an art gallery, Juan Valdez coffee shop, and then there's a hotel down the corner. There's the Renaissance Hotel on the corner.
And can you describe sort of the atmosphere a little bit more? Is it going to be trending more towards the restaurant side or the sports bar side? Is it going to be like congregations for like big, sporting events and college sports or whatever it may be?
A bit of a combination. So I currently own District Tap House downtown, and it's a bit of a mix of the same atmosphere there. So we do have our big sports groups come in, but we also have a lot of just casual dining, and then we have a lot of tourists down there. This particular neighborhood, there are a lot of hotels, so I anticipate, especially during the daytime hours, it to be more restaurant, so to speak. We are not trying to outwardly promote let's have a big Super Bowl party and things like that, but we do plan on adding TVs in there so folks will have something to watch while they're out.
Do you plan on participating in events like SantaCon or
No,
St.
no.
Patrick's?
I don't allow it at my other place.
No, because that's been a big thing that we've been like addressing the past couple of years.
That area too.
Been calming it down.
No, definitely not. And I live 2 blocks over. I'm on Sutton Place, so I do not want that there.
Oh yeah, so with that too, because as you know, living in the neighborhood, it's also very residential. You have the high school around the corner as well. We ask that you put a display in the front, a signage that has the contact information for whoever is the general manager or manager on a nightly basis. So if residents do have complaints or issues with the noise, especially with the open windows and everything, that they have someone that is responsive to their concerns. And then also issue of loitering. We've been seeing a lot of issues with loitering and smoking in the neighborhood as well, so we could have signage to ask patrons not to linger and, with sanitation, cigarettes and all of that type of stuff. If we could have signage about that as well, that would be great. Questions? Yeah.
It got pretty loud at that place before they ultimately closed down.
Really?
I walked by a couple times and I was surprised by it. There's never really been a bar there.
Well, the previous bar was 57 Marvel before it became La Pulperia.
It says here that your windows will close at 10. Did I hear you say that earlier?
Correct. Yeah.
Alright. Yeah, I just worry about there's some windows right near you. There's a giant residential rental building across the street. But otherwise, you're right. There's Juan Valdez coffee store. That big black building is a rental building. But I think that's office, and the corner's probably office.
Right.
And next door is office. Hammer or Schlemmer and stuff. So,
next building is a co-op.
but the white building, yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting area because it is very residential, but also very commercial at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of like why I'm putting these sort of stipulations on it, just because we want to make sure that, especially when we have like two bars next to each other, that it doesn't get to
Right.
become a problem for the residents surrounding it and people who are working there and things like that.
And, you know, usually we have a menu of some sort to kind of understand what type of food will be served. Is there a kitchen there?
There is a kitchen there, yes, it will be a full restaurant. We're working on our menu, we haven't really put it together, but it will be pretty much like the menu I have at my other restaurants. Again, small plates, tapas, and it's a mixed cuisine, so there, it could be a slice of French, you know, lots of little different things in there with slightly larger plates, but not necessarily huge, you know, entrees versus appetizers.
And is it, that second floor is for rent too, is it just the ground floor you're talking about?
We are just the ground floor. I'm not sure how old that sign is because I saw somebody actually in that office. But those are two offices, and yeah, I actually met.
This is also this 2017.
Yeah, I met the woman in this office the other day, so yeah.
And I think there's for sale.
I actually offered to buy it, but she's hesitating. So
there's also a big operation coming to the hotel on the corner of 57 Lou, which is interesting because it's not our community board, it's community board 5.
Okay.
So, you know, that's also something to bear in mind. I think that there'll be a lot of people coming into that place too, you know, hundreds of people.
Out of the hotel.
Yeah. The second floor was like the old Opal.
Right.
But that's, the Tao Group is gonna be opening, or supposed to be opening something over there. I didn't know about it, but all right, you know, I think that, what are the other places, you're Alden Baxter?
I am.
Okay, and these are not, you're both listed as owning other places, so what are the other places?
I own the District Tap House, District Social, for opening District Local. This one owns One Lennox on 61st and 1st Avenue. It's right on this.
It used to be a French restaurant.
Exactly, yes. So he's been in the business for about 24 years. For me, 5 years, it's more of a hobby. I'm a Wall Street guy. So it's just something to invest my money in.
And have there ever been any issues, either with the community or with, you know, health or the police or whatever at any of these establishments?
No.
And then just a question about the music. You said that you would have pre-recorded music. Is this going to be like
Pandora
background music or more of like
background?
party
No,
type
yeah,
music?
background, not a party scene.
So no live music or DJs,
No.
right?
So the 10 o'clock closing of the windows out front will be part of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they have to close them at 10. Yeah, and it's on the application as well.
Yeah, it's on there.
That's covered the rest of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Alright, seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the public regarding this applicant? Seeing none, the motion? That's it. John, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, those abstaining for cause. Alright, welcome to neighborhood. Alright, before we move on, just want to check again, is New York Cruise Jewel here? Alright, perfect. You're both of them, right? Both of yours? Alright. If you had a copy of the applications. if you could give
Yes,
us.
I have copies for you. Good evening. Nice to hear with you tonight again. My name is Rosa Ruiz, representative for the applicant, New York Jewel and the
Rosa,
Cabana Bar.
can you please spell your last name? Just,
RUIZ.
I figured that, but I wanted to make sure I had it right.
And we'll do them separately, so just start with the
Yes.
crown jewel and then we'll do the cabana next. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. But let me give you the copies first. Cabana first.
Cruise jewel.
Jewel.
Yeah. Assembly line.
Awesome.
You got one?
I know. Thanks.
Okay, good. So this is a transfer for an existing liquor license application. Mr. Yang Gao is with me today. He's purchasing the vessels and he's going to continue to operate them as a catering vessel, operating from 11 a.m. to 4 a.m. 7 days a week. DJ, dancing, proper security, food menu, everything. So this is not a new license, but a transfer of existing ownership.
But you weren't involved with the previous
No, he was
ownership,
not at
correct?
all.
So have you operated cruises before, or is this your first venture into
I have not operated cruises before. I've operated plenty of hospitality establishments.
He's been operating establishments for over 20 years. He's never had any violations. He's been a very good part of the community. Nothing
Can you
negative.
describe some of them, like have they been
Yeah,
restaurants or bars?
I have
or-
5 craft beer bars around the city, 3 of them in Manhattan, 2 of them in Queens. We have 2 restaurants in Flushing that we do Chinese food, hot pot, also involves drinking. They're 10,000 square feet places. I used to run a nightclub in Hong Kong, and we used to have 5,000, 6,000 people every night. So I'm very experienced in this industry, and then we thought it's good to have some vessels of our names and to provide that kind of service for people.
Just out of curiosity, what got you into the vessel business?
It's very random. It's just the previous owner wants to get out of the business, and he's ready to retire, and it came into our attention, and we did some due diligence, and we thought it might be a good investment.
Is this the same vessel that's parked there?
Correct. Yes,
Yes.
yes. If you drive down north or south on FDR, it's going to be on your right hand side.
I always wondered what it was.
There are like more than 2 vessels, obviously.
Yeah, I know, but this is one of them.
Yeah, this is one.
You're right next to the school, though.
Correct.
The international
Correct.
school.
Yeah, the United Nations International School.
UN International.
Correct.
Can we pull it up? And I'm just curious, but how does it work? You own the vessel, but you release the pier space or something?
We do. We lease the pier space from Dock NYC, which is a semi-private entity that they lease it from the city.
EDC.
Yeah. They lease it from the city, but then they lease that out to us again. So they basically we're subleasing it sort of from the city.
EDC controls
Like
the
I
water.
can explain.
Yeah.
They lease the docks.
Okay, I'll explain.
I'm just curious how it all works.
Okay, so the way it works is that the vessel, they have to pay the pier a porting fee. So the person who actually owns the vessel has to pay that. And the way it works is that it still works as like a building in New York City or anywhere. So it's essentially like he's still a lessee, and he's leasing the place from the person who actually owns the vessel. So he doesn't actually own the vessel. He's leasing it. So the way the vessel works is that that's the landlord of the building essentially, and then he is a tenant.
So the landlord of the building owns the boat.
Yes.
And leases it
Yes.
from the city, those dock space from
Yes.
the city. So he
Mhm.
pays the city,
And
you
then
pay him.
yes, and then the way it works is that he still has an actual full-fledged on lease, but the vessel works as essentially a building.
Does the vessel move and go
Yeah.
out and come
Yeah.
back?
It does go out, it does come back, but he doesn't actually own the vessel.
Which one is it?
It's this is the Cabana, which is the second one on the docket. But if you scoot back there, that one. Well, actually, not that one. The one next to that, you can't see it.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, that right there. This is the jewel right here. Sorry.
You okay?
Yeah.
So could you actually like walk us through the operation? Like what time
Absolutely.
would you be departing from
Absolutely.
the dock?
So,
When would
so
be
you
returning?
brought up the school situation. We'll almost never operate while the school is in session because most of these trips starts at 6 p.m. So we do try to do about 2 trips, 6 to 10, and then 12 to 4. These are all mostly private events, corporate events. The DJ promote parties and stuff like that. So we provide securities, we provide services, we provide food, we provide the drinks, and we work with different reputable promoters to get people on board and just to go out and have a good time. That's basically.
So would you actually be arriving back to the dock at 4 a.m. or would you be coming back, for example, at 3:30 and then?
People will be out by 4.
So with the, so last time we saw you actually with the previous ownership, so one of the big concerns that we had, particularly for the schools and the neighborhoods, obviously for like Waterside,
Mhm.
and Stuytown,
Mhm.
here in the village,
Sure.
issues with noise, security, sanitation, when everyone is departing
Got it.
the boat, because it becomes like this mass exodus from
Yes.
FDR to like First Avenue,
Yes.
Second Avenue, whatever it may
Yes.
be. So do you have any contingency plans to
Absolutely.
address
Yes.
that?
So we put in motion that I've hired 2 managers from the Tao group. One of them actually works at MSG, so they're very used to controlling large crowds.
Mhm.
We'll have clear signs. We'll have 2 to 3 securities out front at all times to make sure people go to the right places
Mhm.
and not wander around, especially getting off the boat. So they need to be where they need to go quickly. So we'll make sure the streets are clear for all the all modes of transportation to come and pick them up, and most of them are going to be using ride-sharing services. So Lyft, Uber will have to get in and out pretty quickly, and we'll have all of the staff from the boat after the party will come onto the pier first to direct people out, and then go back on the boat and clean up. And as far as noise goes, we've already, the previous owner has already gone through everything for us. There will be no music playing when we dock. Music only starts playing when we are in the middle of the East River. And once we're, anywhere close to the dock, the music stops playing altogether. So.
And one of the other things that we discussed last time too was if there are, do you have any like partnerships with the ride shares, like where riders
No.
could get a discount or anything like
No.
that?
Do not.
Or
No, we
would
don't.
you announce, like we're going to be docking in 30 minutes? Make
Absolutely.
Sure you,
All the announcements will be made. I'll tell them to get your because in that area they're pretty quick. So most people don't really call for car service about 5 minutes before.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like if you have 300, say it is max
No.
capacity
Correct.
335,
No.
you have all these cars coming in at 4 in the
No.
morning
No.
where people are living, honking.
And some of these promoters, they do bring their own shuttle services.
Okay.
So, a good percentage of the people will be shuttled off relatively quickly. And then I've even talked to the hot dog cart that was in front to make sure they move the line to a place where it doesn't impede any traffic. Yeah.
And do you think 2 or 3 security employees are good for 335 people?
Oh,
Guarding,
absolutely. Oh, I mean 2 or 3 at all times. When they board and onboard, we have 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that building next door, that municipal looking type of facility?
On the
Is that a
right?
garage?
That's
No, that's a parking lot, that's a garage.
So actually, a lot of
There's a
people.
gas station.
Yeah, a lot of people do come by car, so they park either in that lot or there's another lot, right?
That's what
Right.
that's the person.
And those other boats, do people live on them? What are they?
Nobody lives on them. These are all pleasure boats, like ours. They do corporate events and stuff
I
like
think
that.
some of them are horn blower.
Yeah,
and-
this one
and
is
there's another
horn-
one.
This one is Hornblower, and those are like Empire Cruises. So we're just one of the companies that designs there.
Would you ever run events docked? Or
No.
No,
No.
no.
Although the city doesn't really, they're not against it, but
Right.
no. Being the reason is every time a ferry goes by, the wave is crazy.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in a restaurant where it's doing this all day.
So essentially the way it works
Want
is
to keep that food down.
people come on at a certain time and then nothing starts off until you're around over here somewhere, away from the pier.
And for this boat, you're gonna have to come here and come out. So basically, we're already doing crowd management at that point. So there's single file coming out, and little by little they'll be dissipating onto the street and onto their train stations.
Irrelevant to the application, but where does the boat go?
They will go anywhere you want them to, within a certain limitations of, these are river boats, so I can't go into the ocean, although that's actually salt water.
So it's
Yeah.
essentially,
It's not a river, yeah.
it essentially, it stays in the water the entire time. It's never on any particular pier whatsoever at any given time. So everything that happens is always within the water.
Yeah, so most
So
people.
it's like it circles like the Statue of Liberty,
most
the
people wants
Empire
to see
State
the
Building, you
Liberty.
know, like
Because you're
it just,
constantly moving, you're not
Yes.
just like sitting out
No.
in the middle of nowhere.
no.
Yeah, it's bad to sit because again, it
Yeah,
bobbles.
I'll-
So like Williamsburg Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge, down to the statue, we'll make a circle and come back.
How long does that take?
Takes about 3 to 4 hours.
Well, if we go full steam, it's an hour round trip, but you know, people want to be on the water for a long time, so we make it back in about 3 hours.
And what time do you, is last call?
Last call is 3 o'clock
Okay.
at night, obviously, 3 o'clock. But we start section by section, so the deck will start last call at 2:30. So we clear everyone out of the top deck first, just because when we come back, we don't want people on the top deck being loud. So we direct them downstairs, which the soundproofing is actually great. If you ever get a chance, even if you're blasting music in there, you can't hear it from outside. So it's all metal, everything. So we get them downstairs and we start last calling downstairs. So.
I think we should have our next committee meeting.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you.
I've never been.
You know I'm always,
Yeah.
guys, you know I'm always very honest, right?
Yeah.
The soundproofing is unbelievable. The way everything works is amazing. I mean, you would have an amazing time and just go
Would
home
love to host
extremely
you guys.
happy and
I've had a great time on some
Yeah.
of these trips.
Okay.
and you know I don't vouch for anybody.
Yeah. So is it ever, are they always private events, or say, you know, like it's a Friday night and I was like, oh, like, you know, I want to go out with
No,
friends.
you can't. You really can't do that.
It's-
It's
it's-
pretty much always. It's not always. Okay, so the way it works is that this is really not a totally catered event, but everything is really private because you always sell the tickets in advance.
Right, because there, you can't walk in and
You
walk
can't
out.
just walk. You just can't
But
walk
could
in
I
and
buy
say
tickets in advance?
yes,
Or-
yes.
Of course.
And how long can we expect that we'll be dealing with you in charge of the operation? Is there, how long is the lease?
Foreseeable future.
Yeah,
Hopefully
he's
forever.
gonna be around for a long time.
Hopefully forever. So yeah, my partner and I are both in the hospitality business, so we really know the business inside out.
Milk and Hops is in that, on First Avenue, 64th
Correct.
and
Yeah,
First.
64th
It's
and
in
First.
a
Mhm.
very,
Yeah.
I would think a rigid type of co-op building, you know,
Correct.
so.
Yes.
If you
Mhm.
still there?
Yes.
If you having any problems with that building?
I've
No.
not had any problem.
Not at all.
I've never had any problem with any of my liquor licenses or with any of the mini boards.
Yeah, and then environmentally, are there stipulations or contingency plans to make sure that patrons aren't throwing things into the river?
Well, absolutely. We actually, that's actually monitored by Coast Guard.
Oh.
So if we do something like that, we get into big trouble for that. So we make sure nobody's holding trash when they leave the boat. So there's a person collecting everything by the exit.
But even like when the boat is in motion or someone.
You can't do it.
That's why we have securities.
Okay.
Mhm.
You know, obviously, has it happened? Probably, but we'll try our best not to. Yeah. Because when people drink a little, they might.
Yeah, we can't control it.
But we'll do our best to control it for sure.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion? No objection? Second by Kevin. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, those abstaining. That's good luck. And then the second one?
The second one is
Pretty
the
much
same
the
thing.
Same thing?
I mean, I'll give you a copy of everything, but
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
Is it just slightly bigger capacity?
It's exactly the same.
No,
It's a little bit,
Capacity.
little
This
bit
one's a
more,
little bit
little
bigger.
bit more, yeah.
this one's a little bit
Like
bigger.
20% more?
I think
Like
it's
35.
Yeah, I wanna say
25?
30.
Oh, okay.
This is
I
the
guess
one.
they're the-
And this is this guy right here. It actually doesn't look like that now. It's been painted. There's like a graffiti looking boat. That's everywhere else. So the only difference between this one and that one is the crowd control. The entrance for this boat is right here. So we actually make a line over this way. It doesn't impede with any other traffic over there. And here is a pickup point where it's away from the street. That's off the FDR. This is actually not FDR. This is just a private street. So people make a circle in here to pick up passengers, and they leave right there, and then they can get on the FDR somewhere around there.
So what's the coordination with the other operators? Do you ever have events on the same night where you would have multiple lines going to each of
The only way
boats?
the boats can ever leave the docks is that it has to be specifically coordinated so that nobody has any interfering actions. So the boats can only leave at very specific times.
So even if it was the same night, it would be like staggered?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, it has to be at very specific times to make sure that when the vessels are leaving, they can leave the port at very given time so that no one's colliding into
Because
one another.
this is the only hole where any boat can
Yeah.
get. Right, so we can't only
right?
in
So it's
and
the same
out.
thing when you come back.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we give
So
our
everything is
schedule.
very specific.
We'll give our schedule to the dock every month, so they coordinate everything. And they'll
Because I was more concerned about like people showing up early and then you just have people for hornblower, hornblower
You
2.
can't.
No.
Yeah.
You can't. Everything is very specific, very extremely timelined. This isn't, the vessels are operated very specific. It's
Cool.
not like a bar where you can just walk in whenever you want. Everything is very specific, very coordinated. You have to be there at a specific time, otherwise you're gone. You're done. Like, you're just gonna lose your money.
And then
It's done.
out on the water, we're under the jurisdiction of Coast Guard, so
Yes.
they don't play around.
And the Coast Guard is very strict.
Especially near the UN.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. I can't even, I was gonna try to take a drone photos of the boat. Can't. Absolutely not.
Did you even go out during UN week in the first week?
Last time, when, I was, we're trying to go out with the previous owner, Trump was in town.
Yeah.
So we can't get through a certain barrier, so we got stopped, I think right by Winnisburg Bridge, so anything under there can't
And they
get
have
there.
divers in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong.
And I'm assuming you only run the summer months or spring and summer?
Well,
months?
it's a whole year-round operation, but in this winter month, for 3 months or so, the boats are taken out of the water for maintenance, for Coast Guard requirements, so they inspect everything about the boat, try to make sure everyone is safe, when we do operate, so, but we do operate when the boats are not in Vega.
That's cold.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none. Are there any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Is there a motion? Kevin, second by John. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, those abstaining. Congrats.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, really
All right.
cool.
Do you want to sign
Thank you, good
anything?
luck with that.
No, you're good. No, there were no changes. Yep.
11 to 4?
Thank you so much. Yep. Have a great night.
Eleven.
Thank
too.
you. Huh?
We have a little.
So last up, King Jane. King
Thank you.
Jane
Good night.
Garden.
Thank you, Cody.
Have a good night.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, my name's Mitchell Siegel. I represent the applicant, King J Garden Inc. They purchased the restaurant from the prior owner, Lychee House, recently. It's been a Chinese restaurant for a long period of time. I believe before Lychee House, it was Home Kitchen. It's a sit-down, full-service Chinese Thai restaurant. Really no changes to the premises whatsoever. They're seeking hours from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. for 7 nights. The principal is experienced, was a manager of a major hotel in China and has a hotel management degree. Now is here in America and is going to run and operate this restaurant. It's a full menu. There will be sit-down restaurant as well as delivery service. It's 55 seats. And really just continuing the operation that has existed with 2 prior owners in the same space.
I mean, I just have a couple questions, because in some of these responses, both yes and no.
Yeah, there was a mistake, and I corrected that, so, and I apologize for that.
So the X
My
marks are the
assistant
correct
did that.
one.
So, well, she said, the applicant previously held a liquor license. My assistant thought it was talking about the prior restaurant. The applicant has not previously held a liquor license.
Okay.
Other than that, we changed the principals, have owned or managed other establishments. She was involved for a while with another King J Garden in Flushing, not as an owner. And other than that, we've added principal/manager will always be on site. Everything else remained the same.
So have you reached out, so yeah, both yes and no are marked for have you reached out to the residents?
Yeah, so there's a petition on the back, signed by residents in the area. Residents, I believe, above, or surrounding and above the retail establishment. And, obviously, the restaurant has been there for a while, so there really has been no opposition to the change in ownership.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I've eaten at Lychee House, sad to see the old owner go. He's not affiliated in any way anymore?
No, Lychee House was good. I live in the neighborhood also, not too far away, and it was a good restaurant.
Any others? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Those abstaining for cause. Alright, congrats.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Alright, so next up on the agenda, we'll be discussing City Council intro, 1116-2018. In preparation for that discussion, we have guests from the Street Vendor Project. If you'd like to join the table, take the mic and introduce yourself and the work that you're doing. Thank you. I'll give you this one.
Okay. Hi. Should I stand or sit?
Oh, you can sit.
Okay, great. My name is Matthew Shapiro. That's Shapiro. And I work at the Street Vendor Project, and we are a nonprofit organization that's part of the Urban Justice Center, which is a larger umbrella nonprofit that provides legal services to mostly marginalized communities in New York City. There's 12 different projects, and we're just one of them. So we function sort of like a union or a membership organization for all vendors in the city. We provide free legal services and also do advocacy and community organizing when it comes to sort of, building the power of the community of street vendors here in the city. I have some materials for everyone. There's some background information about the proposed legislation. There's some myths and facts. There's some information about small vendors and their relationship to other small businesses, which is sometimes what people are concerned about. So I'll just pass them. And what else can I say about the Street Vendor Project? We were founded in 2001. And we have about 2,000 members spread out all throughout the 5 boroughs. And I can talk a little bit about sort of the history of this legislation and why, how did it come about, why is it needed, if that's helpful. Are folks familiar, or should I go?
Yeah, so I think if you could do like a little bit of a 101 on it, and
Sure.
then where the Street Vendor Project stands on this.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in order to understand the legislation, it's helpful to sort of understand the biggest issue that is affecting mobile food vendors in the city right now. So this legislation mostly deals with food vendors, not other types of vendors. I mean, we could go into lots of background. There's different types of vendors. There's general vendors selling merchandise, food vendors selling food. But let's just talk briefly about food vendors. Food vendors to operate are required to have both a license issued by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and a permit that's also issued by the Health Department. The permits are those stickers that you see on the carts now. Now you're seeing more that have letter grades as the new letter grading system gets implemented for food vendors. So the license is an ID card. Anyone can get one. I have one. You have to pass a food safety course. You have to pay a fee. You have to have a sales tax ID that's issued by New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, which every single business in New York State has to have in order to show you're reporting your sales tax, either every 3 months or every year. There's no limit on the number of licenses. However, once you have a license, you can only work on a cart or a truck that has one of those permits, and those are the stickers. And this is where we run into the problem. In 1983, the city put a cap on the number of permits that can be issued at any one time. So there's a few different categories of permits, but full-term, 2-year citywide permits, meaning that you can operate the whole year in any of the 5 boroughs, are capped at 3,000, and the number has not increased since 1983. So we're talking about more than 35 years. The city's population has grown, lots of things have changed, but the number of mobile food vending permits has remained the same. And this, as you can imagine, what happens when you have a short supply and a large demand, it creates a very, very lucrative and illegal underground market where these permits are rented out for exorbitantly high prices. So a permit owner, the person who holds this permit in their name and renews it every 2 years, they used to be vendors, right? But now, maybe they're retired, maybe they have a different job, maybe they were tired of working on the street for 20 years.
They want to make more money.
Exactly. So, they could give this permit back to the city, but why would they, when they could rent it out to someone who wants to be a vendor, who's actually working on the street? The permit holder pays $200 every 2 years to the city, and it's rented for between $20,000 and $30,000. Think of it as like an unregulated taxi medallion system. So that's the major problem. Many vendors cannot afford this. The ones that do struggle. Sometimes you'll see vendors selling without permits. It's more common, not so common in this district, but more common sort of in the outer boroughs. You know, vending has always been a way for mostly new immigrants to sort of make a living here in New York City. There have been street vendors ever since the 1600s, where the first street food actually sold in New York City were oysters, because back then the river was really clean and there were tons of oysters. So they would sell oysters and clams from food carts. There's some great old photos. So there's a storied history of New York City street vending, and it's really contributed to the economic development of the city, because we've had a lot of examples where some street vendors that have been successful have been able to open up brick and mortar restaurants or stores and really, really grow their business. So we want to continue, support for these smallest of small businesses, but the problem of the permits has been really, detrimental to most folks' business. So, getting back to the legislation, this legislation would do primarily 3 things. 1, it would create the first ever office of street vendor enforcement. Right now, enforcement is scattered between the police department, the health department, the Department of Consumer Affairs, Parks Department sometimes the sanitation department, sometimes the fire department. You guys work closely with city government, so you know what happens when there's too many agencies trying to do one thing, right? So this would centralize enforcement and training in one agency. The second thing it would do, it would gradually increase the number of mobile food vending permits that are available by about 445 every year for 10 years, with a certain percentage set aside for military veterans. Veterans have always had a special preference when it comes to street vending. They're the only ones that can currently apply for general vending licenses, those different category of vendors that sell merchandise. So we want to keep that preference in there. And the third thing that it would do is that it would create a community advisory board with all types of stakeholders, representatives from property owners, representatives from small business associations, grocery stores, you name it. Anyone that is concerned or wants to be part of the conversation about street vending is part of this advisory board, and they're the ones that are going to be looking at all the regulations and determining, which regulations make sense, which regulations don't make sense. And it's their job to resolve any issues that come up when it comes to street vendors.
And who would be appointing people to the advisory board? Would it be the mayor, the office?
So if you look in the legislation, it's split between the mayor and the city council. And there's specific numbers of people that have, there has to be certain representatives from the vending community, obviously, certain representatives from the small business community. I think there's representatives from the different unions. So it's in there very, very specifically, where these representatives come from. The prior Street Vendor Advisory Board, which hasn't done anything since 2001, was made up of different agency heads and had no representation from the street vending community. So it really didn't work out. So hopefully this one is more inclusive and brings people together. There was similar legislation that was introduced in 2017. It was called Intro 1303. It didn't there was no vote on it, so it was reintroduced this past fall by city council members. The prime sponsors are Councilmember Margaret Chin and Councilmember Carlos Menchaca. And there's 25 co-sponsors currently. There was a hearing on April 11th.
Do our local elected officials support the bill or not?
So we have a great relationship with Councilmember Powers' office. Who's the other? So Carlina Rivera is on the bill. Councilmember Powers is not yet on the bill. We're hopeful that he will support it. We have a good relationship with his office. Sometimes there are issues relating to specific vendors in the community, and they've called us and they've asked us to come out, and we've gone out. And by the way, we're always happy to do that. If anyone has issues like specific sites that are causing an issue, we're happy to come up, and maybe we even know the vendors, so it'll be easy for us to help out. Yeah, so those are the three main things that the bill would do. Vendors have been waiting for this for 35 years, so we're hopeful that this is the time it'll happen.
I'm sorry. So what's next? So because I remember when this was introduced initially, and then it kind of just didn't go anywhere. Yeah. And here we are again. So what's next? Is this going to come out of a committee of some sort, or what happens here?
So it's before the department, as far as Committee on Consumer Affairs. It's headed by Councilmember Espinal. We're hopeful that it's going to move out of the committee into a vote, but we don't know exactly what the timing is. I mean,
where are the sponsors? What districts are they from?
Councilmember Chin is downtown Manhattan. There's one. Councilmember Menchaca is like Sunset Park area in Brooklyn. But there's 23 other sponsors from all over. There's bipartisan support. Councilmember Ulrich is on the bill. Councilmember Holden's on the bill, if that matters for anyone. Want to be bipartisan.
How many vendors are there right now? Let's just say
legally and
right. So the problem is that there's no way to determine the actual number of vendors. There's about 5,000 permitted food carts. There were those 3,000 that I talked about that are full-term 2-year citywide food permits. There's 1,000 temporary permits that are valid for the summertime from April through October. And then there's 1,000 green card permits, which are only valid for whole fruits and vegetables in outer areas of the city. This was a program launched by Mayor Bloomberg back in 2009, I believe. So there's 5,000 permitted carts and trucks that are out there right now, and maybe during the summertime.
So, and what will this increase it to ultimately? 10,000?
So 445 per year for 10 years.
So about 10,000.
Right. It would less than double the amount of permits. I mean, and it's not even guaranteed that they would all be used. That's just the maximum that would be allowed under the legislation.
So I was actually going to follow up with that. Is that enough? Is that too much or too little in an ideal
right.
world?
So coming from the advocacy perspective, we advocated initially for them to lift the caps on permits. What people don't know, people say, oh, well, if you have unlimited permits, the vendors will be everywhere. Putting aside whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, there are highly specific regulations determining where vendors can and cannot be. There are dozens of streets that in New York City that are completely restricted to vending, and once you find a street that's unrestricted, there are only certain places on the sidewalk that vendors can set up. They have to be 10 feet from every crosswalk, 20 feet from every building entrance, they have to be near the curb, they have to be a certain distance from cell phone booths, and payphone booths and fire hydrants. So there's only a certain number of spots that are available on every street. So our thinking, at least coming from the Street Vendor Project, was like, well, if someone wants to start a mobile food vending business and they can find a spot to do it, we should give them a permit to do it. Putting these caps in place creates these underground markets and all sorts of unintended consequences that really continue to marginalize these most vulnerable communities. So we would really like a complete lifting of the caps, but this being New York City, probably not going to happen. So we sort of, we understand that legislation and policy is all about compromise. So we think this is a really good step in the right direction.
And just, I don't know if you would know the answer to this, I'm assuming you would, say, how do they prioritize which applicant gets a certain space? I'm assuming maybe multiple people may apply for a similar space because they say, hey, it's great for business. How do they?
So permits are not spot specific.
Okay.
So vendors, I mean, you're right, because in this area especially, most vendors have been selling in the location for a long time.
Yeah.
So they tend to be like, people know that that's their spot. But this hopefully will open up opportunities in areas where there aren't any vendors, and will be really, really good for the community in those places.
That's the thing. See, I've been involved in vending for 20 years, and they're very hard-working people. And I've heard all kinds of arguments, pro and con, to these kind of things. And this is a very refreshing presentation you've just given. I was on community board 8 for a while, they deal with this,
That's Upper East Side.
Upper East
Oh,
Side.
yeah.
You know, the bids, they deal with it, and you must know that, and they've taken a position with respect to it.
Sure.
You know, the arguments that are being made are that there is no enforcement with respect to where the vending is allowed. So there's a lot of vending out there taking place where it shouldn't. Now maybe this dedicated enforcement unit will help to solve some of those issues because the laws are so convoluted and hard to read, even for someone like me, and probably when you first took a look at them yourself, that it's really difficult to know for a police officer to know whether somebody's legal or not.
Even as an operator.
Maybe that's probably the case too. And there's been talk about geotagging vendors and limiting them to 2 per block face, and maybe even having a vendor, what do you call it, parking. You know that you can stick a card into the parking meter and get a little tag for your car, and if you get there early enough and you're on the block face, maybe you can stick have a tag saying, I'm here first, I'm allowed to be here. But, there are also arguments that can be made that the people, will monopolize prime spots. There won't be opportunities for others to get in on them, and so you may still wind up with this similar type of black market, which I've heard about and know about, and understand. You have people who probably don't even live in New York City who probably have these permits and make quite a bit of money off of them.
Absolutely.
So the question that I often hear is that if you have 10,000, everybody wants to be in Manhattan because it's where the action's at and all the people. So if there are 5,000 now and you're doubling them, it should have a serious impact on our streetscape. There are other arguments too that have always been made with respect to some of the perceived inequity with respect to how certain vendors may set up outside of a grocery store and sell fruit, and they don't have to pay employment taxes. They don't have to necessarily sweep 18 inches into the gutter like the storefronts do. They're not paying rent, they're not paying commercial rent, they're not paying commercial carding. So with that, there are issues there, and maybe perhaps this legislation and the dedicated enforcement unit might be able to address some of that stuff. But the same arguments hold true for other brick and mortar stores. I've heard stories about vendors setting up right outside of a coffee shop or a little tobacco store, who makes a ton of money selling little pressed sandwiches and coffee until the vendor moves right outside. So you go through 2nd Avenue subway, let's say, on 72nd Street, and you may have had a guy in a storefront there for 30, 40 years selling coffee and little sandwiches. And once the 2nd Avenue, and suffered through the 2nd Avenue subway, and once the 2nd Avenue subway opens, it's lined up with vendors, and they kill his business, So, there are really thorny issues involved here with respect to this stuff, and, there's always been vending in New York. Yes, you can look at the Lower East Side and see the apple carts and everything else, and it is a part of our city. But I don't know necessarily that. Granted, it'll be a gradual increase, but if you don't know what the landscape looks like now with accurate enforcement, because nobody seems to really be enforcing where people can be. How are you supposed to know what it's going to look like with 10,000 people? Double that amount, 10,000 of them. So it's you know all of the arguments, I'm sure.
I do, and I want to try to address a few of your points. There was a lot there.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can remember, and then you can remind me
Sure.
when I don't address all of them.
Yeah.
The first one is the enforcement issue. Some people say there is no enforcement. It's not true. Last year there were 18,000 violations written to all types of vendors around the city. You're welcome to come to I wish I could have brought the box of tickets that I have in my office that vendors bring to us where we provide representation at the court. So there is lots of enforcement. You may see something you don't like on the street, and you may think, oh, well, there's no enforcement. But in fact, there's a lot of enforcement. Second, as you stated, this would, to the people that say there's no enforcement, well, now we have a dedicated Office of Street Vendor Enforcement, right? It's true, the enforcement is scattered now. Maybe the you call the health department about a vendor, they say, oh no, that's not our jurisdiction. Or you call the police department, you say, oh no, call the health department, right? So maybe it's because the enforcement is so scattered that there's a perception of there being no enforcement. But in fact, there is enforcement that exists. Ask any vendor if they ever got tickets from the health department or the police department, if they've ever been inspected before, and they will. Second thing you mentioned just quickly about geotagging. All vendors now will be getting GPS devices, all food vendors. That goes along with the letter grading program. The third main thing is about the perception of unfair competition. And this is an important issue that you raise, as many people raise it. So there is this perception that if you have vendors on the street that they're taking business away from brick and mortar businesses. But in fact, all the research has shown that it's not true, and some of the research is included. There's a one-pager about it, and then there's a big study out of LA, which I think is really interesting. Are folks familiar with what happened in LA recently, or California? So Los Angeles was the only major city in the country to completely ban sidewalk vending. You couldn't do it. But guess what? There were thousands of people selling food and merchandise on the sidewalks because this is what they did to make a living. So last year, they have been fighting for this for many, many years, to legalize street vending, to get permits and licenses. And last year, the governor of California, Jerry Brown, signed a law that said cities in California cannot prohibit street vending, and they cannot limit the number of street vendors in their cities except for legitimate health and safety reasons. So this
essentially that was unlimited.
Unlimited. This
There's
is
no cap.
this is historic. So Los Angeles, one of the biggest cities in the country, now has no cap on the number of vending permits, and they're going to make rules like we have in New York. You have to be a certain number of feet. You have to be on a sidewalk that's X number of feet wide. And one of the biggest studies that came out of the LA, which is in there, is from the Economic Roundtable, showing how not only do vendors not compete with brick and mortar businesses, but they bring people to commercial corridors. They enhance the walkability of sidewalks, which ends up having more business for both the vendors and the brick and mortar shops. You can imagine, like, if you're walking down a street that's empty, or you're walking down a street that has food carts or tables on it, you're going to be drawn to the street that has more activity on it, and that's going to result in more business for everyone.
You may not. You may find that it's hard to walk down the street and take another one.
It's true, but our regulations are set up, so there has to be a certain sufficient sidewalk space for you to be able to walk. That's why we have all these spatial regulations that govern street vending. The second thing is that, there's lots of research that's been done. I'll let you read the one pager in there about competition, but
I took a look real quick and I saw what happened on Fulton Street, but I also noticed that the one on 14th Street is from 1990.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I have to take a better look at all that.
Sure. And there was a more recent report that was done by an urban planning student at Pratt University that analyzed vendors and the relationship between vendors and brick and mortars in 4 neighborhoods. In Jackson Heights in Corona, in Sunset Park, in Nolita, and on the Upper East Side, I believe. And they found, she went in and she talked to vendors and she talked to store owners. In fact, that most of the vendors and store owners have synergistic relationship. I mean, there were stories about store owners letting vendors store their merchandise, like they're, not food vendors, of course, but store their merchandise in, letting folks use the bathroom, watching over their stands. I mean, vendors also provide such an important public safety function because most of them have been in the neighborhoods for a long time and they know what's going on. I mean, we remember a number of years ago in Times Square when there was that bomb that almost went off. There was a street vendor that alerted the police because they know exactly what's happening in their neighborhoods. So they provide an important public safety function. And yeah, I invite you to look through the literature about the competition because it's true, a lot of business associations come in and say, oh, the vendors are killing our business, but there's no data to support it. There's no studies that have been done. All the studies that have been done show that vendors increase business to brick and mortars.
And I guess the dedicated enforcement unit would take care of fruit stands that stay out all night. Or because, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a bus stop.
Right.
And I can't see the bus coming. I've got to go 3 lanes into traffic because there's a van, not even a van, a box truck covered in graffiti, perpetually parked there to service or, in association with the fruit cart.
Is that, I mean, what's the parking rules in
I don't
in
know,
those
but I'm
spots?
just telling you my experience.
Yeah,
I go
no.
out and I'm so frustrated by this truck, you know, and it's got like,
So you-
selling G&G produce on the side, and I gotta risk my life to see if the bus is coming. But,
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a
I-
parking issue it should be dealt with. I mean, vendors, well, for one, vendors aren't allowed to stay 24 hours. They must go back to their commissaries at least once per day to service and clean the carts and bring it back. Yeah, I mean, if it's a particular location, I'm happy to follow up about it and see if we can talk to the vendor.
Just for clarification with that point, when we talk about street vendors, I know there are a number of different vendors, but in terms of, like, let's just talk about food vendors, because I think that's the big one that we're talking about. Would as Matt mentioned, a fruit vendor stand be considered a street vendor under this? They would
Yes.
have the same thing as a food truck, essentially?
Yeah, so anyone selling food from a cart or a truck is a mobile food vendor. So whether you're selling produce or whether you have a cart that's selling cooked food or whether you're a food truck, they all require the same permits and they all fall under the same regulations.
So a fruit vendor wouldn't be 24/7?
No mobile food vendor can operate 24 hours continuously. That's what the regulations say.
And does this apply to the guy who sells, sunglasses and case?
They are street vendors, but they are licensed by the Department of Consumer Affairs. There's slightly different rules. This legislation does not affect them in terms of increasing the number of those types of licenses.
Are they part of the 3,000?
No. There's 853 licensed general vendors in New York City, except for military veterans. That cap was put in place in 1979 and hasn't been changed either. That's another issue that we're not talking about in this legislation. Military veterans can get a general vendor's license despite the limit, despite the 853 limit.
I just want to quickly ask, so it says that de Blasio is like not for this piece of legislation?
Well, he wasn't in the past. We don't know how he feels. Yeah, 1303 he was against.
Okay.
Well, he was for it and then he was against it. This one, his representatives at the hearing were not encouraging. They didn't give a definitive answer,
Okay.
but it didn't sound great.
Okay.
So we have some work to do.
Interesting. Okay.
So, you have a follow-up?
No, I was just curious, like, what he was going to do to try in any way, or what he did in the past to try to, like, stop the legislation. But I could talk to him.
Yeah, he said there are things in the legislation that aren't there that he wanted to see. And we said, great, what are they? Please tell us, and we're happy to talk about it.
Okay.
So that's actually my question for you.
Yeah.
So the umbrella question is, what is not in this legislation right now that you would have liked to have seen? Because at least for us as the committee, we haven't, this is the first time we're discussing it, we haven't taken a position on it yet. Obviously, the point of this conversation is that ultimately we could come to some opinion on the matter. And what we've done in the past with a lot of legislation is, particularly when we have, there's a proposed, intro, and we want to see some improvements to it. We have been advocates for that as well. So what, the umbrella question particularly, what is not in this legislation that you would have liked to have seen, or that maybe as the committee we could advocate for?
Right.
And then under that specifically, I'm interested particularly in like worker exploitation. I know there's some information on that, but in terms of, are there any built-in protections for workers, particularly because they are Americans, immigrants, it's very easy to be taken advantage of. Maybe there are things that are not as strong as they could have been, if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, one thing about the worker exploitation is if their employees are subject to all the same labor laws, and recently the Department of Health began requiring proof of workers' compensation and disability insurance, which is a good thing to show that if everything that happens while they're on the job that they're covered. So that's a really, really great protection. That's always been in place, but now sort of the enforcement has been stepped up a bunch. So
I've always wondered about like breaks, for example, because like I work down on Fulton Street and William Street, and even when I'm walking there and seeing people working kind of like the pastry type things, I never know when they take a break to like even go to the bathroom, or if
the breakfast carts.
Yeah, or they're even there during lunch and doing stuff like that too. So if there are any built-in protections for that too, because I know that they are subject to the same labor laws as well, but how is that actually in practice?
It's not easy, and it's a case these are all individual businesses. I mean, if you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, you find a place, hopefully you find a brick and mortar store that you have a great relationship with to let them use the bathroom.
I had a friend friend of mine, he had a cart on 37th Broadway, and I go there to get some food from him. You know, because this was all at first. You know, when you read as a lawyer, when you read laws, and you're like, I can't buy from like a street vendor because he's not in the right place or something like that. But I came to really enjoy my local street vendor and became friendly with him. And he actually I'd go to get my food, and he'd say, "Hold on a second, I'll be right back." And he would leave me with his cart, flaming, his cart, for 5 or 10 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, it's this guy. I gotta get back to work." And I guess they do whatever they gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Just like you're a local bodega owner, they're part of the community, and in the face of a city that's rapidly changing with more and more chains, street vendors are one of the ultimate mom and pop businesses that hopefully we can protect.
I have a couple more questions, if you guys don't mind.
Does anyone in the public have questions related to this at all? Or?
Yeah, actually, I'm a brick and mortar restaurant owner. I'm on 52nd and Lexington. It's kind of interesting just because there's 3 street cart vendors there. We've been there. My family's kind of owned and operated a business there for.
Could you also introduce yourself?
Sorry, Alex Xenopoulos, Xenopoulos is my surname, and then the restaurant used to be called Oxford Cafe, now it's the Mill. So obviously these old timers who we know really well, they use our restrooms, but it is kind of interesting. Some other vendors will try to come in early in the morning and sneak a spot, and then all hell breaks loose. And then also towards Park Avenue, there's a lot of kind of spaces again for food trucks. And again, early in the morning, before 5 a.m., 5:30, it's an absolute disaster. Just the different vendors fighting for those spots. One of the issues, obviously, just from my perspective, the state of the city's transformed just because a lot of the brick and mortar retail has become food and beverage. So there is a saturation point. So even for a lot of these vendors who will be getting permits, the economics may not be favorable for them, even if they're not. Just because there's so much more competition now than there used to be. Even
they'll have to go somewhere else in the city where that's not 52nd Street.
No, for sure. It's just a kind of a general state of play that as retail reality is everywhere. It's not just that kind of one part of Manhattan. I think the one thing, just kind of hearing you speak, one of our frustrations was always kind of a lot of food vendors, mostly food trucks at some point were coming a lot on the street and became a little bit of a market, and it became more of a nuisance, and there wasn't one point of contact that we could speak to. And I think having an entity that is kind of centralized authority over this matter, I think would be really useful. And I think it's something that the city should be doing immediately, not wait for related to sort of issuing new permits.
Right. So the enforcement unit will be set up a year before the permits get to start the issuing.
I guess my point is more that there's obviously an issue here. Part of the problem, as you were saying, is that you have the licenses for the trucks or the actual carts, and what's happening is that there's a black market, which usually happens when there's like supply demand issues, but part of the reason there is that matter where people are getting gouged is also because of the lack of enforcement on the part of the city, not actually enforcing who has the permit. Oh, you have the license, why aren't you operating it? What's going on here? And I think that also shows the city's inability to kind of manage its streets. And I think part of the reason why this bill sounds good, obviously I think a lot of initial reaction from a lot of different parties will be, oh my God, there's going to be so many more vendors, but there are obviously rules in place. But the hope, I think, is that by expanding, but also in conjunction with it, actually enforcing the rules properly, instead of, what you were saying earlier, just like there are rules in place, they are being enforced, but I think even the vendors feel they're being probably unfairly enforced, or inconsistently. That's what I feel oftentimes for our operation with, let's say, the Department of Health. We'll have one inspector come in, won't care about things. Next time, completely different outlook. So it's a very inconsistent approach. But also
where did you say your business?
It's looking at 140 East 52nd Street, the Mill.
Oh, okay.
Also, will this impact, let's say, like street fairs or anything?
No, it's nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that. Okay.
Completely separate. Those are not under
So we'll
these.
bring that up in
under
the
these.
Yeah, thank you.
I have just a couple more questions. Sales tax.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about how to adequately collect it and account for it, and how do you go about doing that? Because I think there are laws on the books now about having to maintain some sort of log or something like that. But is that going to be under the purview of this new enforcement?
So sales tax is collected by New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. Every single vendor, before they obtain a license, has to obtain a sales tax certificate of authority. It's those orange cards. You see them in every business, in every restaurant, every store. They all have them. People who have those certificates of authority are required to file their sales tax with the state every 3 months or every year. So including vendors. So if they don't file, they're subject to penalties. And an additional requirement for vendors that doesn't apply to any other business is that they have to show proof that they filed their sales tax before they get to renew their license or permit. I'm not aware of that requirement. I mean, maybe this gentleman, correct me if I'm wrong, do restaurants have to show proof that they filed their sales tax in order to renew their food service establishment permit?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
we saw it.
Maybe
It
I'm
is a
wrong.
requirement, I believe.
Oh, really?
I mean, I'm not sure, but I believe it is.
Oh, do you have to go to get clearance by the state's Department of Taxation and Finance?
I'd have to. I mean, we pay quarterly at all my businesses,
Right.
but I'd have to speak to my team.
Oh, okay.
It is a
If
requirement.
it is, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken, but it's a requirement for vendors at least, maybe perhaps other
Yeah,
small
maybe
businesses.
that. I'll double check.
That they have to show, they have to be cleared by New York State Department of Taxation and Finance and New York City Department of Taxation and Finance. So if there's outstanding taxes that haven't been filed or outstanding penalties that haven't been paid, they won't renew their license or permit.
But I guess my point is, and I guess it's a universal question because it pertains to brick and mortar spots too. How do we ensure that the city or the state or whoever collects it is getting their fair share of the taxes? That's all.
Yeah, that's not a vendor issue, that's a small business issue.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about standardized street furniture for table vendors?
Standardized street for table vendors.
Yeah,
I think we.
all of this has come up in things that I've heard.
Yeah,
about.
merchandise, non-food vendors.
Merchandise.
Vendors. I would talk to the vendors and see what they thought.
Because
I don't. My personal opinion.
Well, in your organization.
Oh, okay.
Your table, you only allow a certain length of table.
Right.
I think that the height of it also might be regulated.
Yeah, 8 by 3 by 5.
And so there was discussions about, can they use the same table, and could there be a Velcro banner around it that made it look pretty, and all the stuff would be stored underneath it, and because these are our streets, and the streetscape is regulated. You have the contracts with SEMUSA or SEMUSA, whatever it is, for the bus stops, and now they put in all the kiosks, for the Wi-Fi kiosks and everything else. So this is part of our streetscape. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think people might have different ideas of what design might look best, but it's an interesting idea. I mean, it doesn't seem like a big hindrance.
And finally, when you say that, is there anything else that we should be advocating for the bill? It's almost that you're presuming that the bill will be approved by us, but we
No, I
really-
asked him if he wanted, if there was anything in the bill that he wanted.
This is such a big issue because we're in Midtown Manhattan, and this is where the vendors want to be.
Well, that was my
It's our
follow-up
streets.
question, but I am curious if there were things in the bill that they wanted, because I like to know,
So,
like,
and
what
you're
would
not
be
gonna
on the
like-
wish
You're not
list.
gonna like hearing this, but we really need to hear from all the parties
sure.
involved,
Of
like the
course.
bids, because they have a very detailed stance on where they stand with respect to street vending. So maybe it calls for more of a forum type of arrangement. I don't know.
No, I mean, this is just the beginning of the discussion, we're not coming up with a resolution.
So in terms of like other stuff, I mean, this bill and the prior one was a product of like intense negotiation over a
Right.
long period of time. So yeah, we would have liked to see more permits or in the bill, but this is what it sort of got whittled down to, and I'm sure there will be continued negotiations. So at this point, I don't have anything specific that's not on the bill, just because we spent so many years already, 5 years. This campaign has been going on, trying to provide some relief to these folks. But I appreciate your question.
No. So so this is my next question. As I think about this personally, I think that this legislation is good for New York City as a whole, particularly outer boroughs and particularly in food deserts where there are no other options for foods or goods and things like that. But when we're talking about our specific district, we are from 14th Street to 59th Street, which is highly commercial, highly congested, And I don't know if this is specifically in the bill yet, but this is just how I'm sort of compartmentalizing it as well. Are there restrictions on, for example, capping where people can street vendor, particularly in highly commercial areas, so where there are a lot of brick and mortars where it might be oversaturation, where even though like there's some data that says that they wouldn't be in direct competition, it's still kind of hard for me to like see that practically if you have a taco truck in front of a taco restaurant, how that wouldn't be competition, and especially that you don't sort of like reserve space ahead of time and say which applicant can be where, and if that would be something that you think would be if we were to talk about sort of capping in highly commercial areas, if that would actually be a hindrance to economic empowerment or anything of the sort.
Right. So other folks have also been concerned about that, and there was some discussion about dividing up the permits between the different boroughs. I don't know if it was like really neighborhood specific, but folks have been worried about the perception that everyone's going to want to be in Manhattan. So they would say, okay, what about half the permits for Manhattan and half the permits for the outer boroughs, or some way to make it evenly distributed, so any fear of oversaturation wouldn't happen, and we're open to that. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting idea.
Yeah, because like even aside from that, I'm just also worried about, like we've talked a lot about pedestrian space, about particularly in this area, traffic is awful, and just having like food trucks or things on the sidewalks that would actually improve it. What?
Sidewalk cafes.
Yeah, so like we talked about sidewalk cafes today, and that's been one of our priorities, as well as like the creep of sidewalk cafes onto actual pedestrian space, which is hindered, like for parents with strollers or people who are in wheelchairs, things of that nature. How going back to your point about streetscape and how we organize public space. So
I'm waiting on that.
yeah, so that these are just like thoughts that I'm having in my head, which is why I'm asking the question. It doesn't mean I'm.
Yeah, no. These are all valid questions. And again, I mean, the pedestrian passage one is an important issue, and I just want to highlight, the rules are very clear about what type of sidewalks vendors can operate on, and their clearance requirements from things like crosswalks and bus stops and other things, and those are all designed to make sure that pedestrians have safe passage.
And have those also not been updated since '83, or are those?
Those were done in a series of patchwork laws starting in 1977 was the first time that they put in.
And do you know when it was? Because like especially thinking about how like development and bus stops and things like obviously streets have completely changed from when they may have been originally. Do you know like when the last time they were updated or changed or?
No, the last the most recent restrictions actually restricted more streets to vendors downtown Manhattan and Flushing, Queens. That didn't have to do with citywide. Before that was probably in 2001. But I wanted to note that the purpose of the advisory board is to go through and review all the regulations and see which ones make sense for today's streetscape and which ones need to be changed or eliminated or added to. And with sort of an inclusive group of stakeholders, folks representing all the different interests, including city agencies, ones that need to be updated or clarified, hopefully will be.
First of all, I want to thank you. This has been an education for me, and I appreciate the chance to get to learn more about what's obviously an important topic. I love getting food from street vendors. I used to work downtown, and I get my lunch there every day. But where is this bill right now? Is it in a committee, or is it?
So there was a hearing on April 11th before the Committee on Consumer Affairs. It's currently in the committee.
Yeah, I mean, just like towards that point, I think having one agency that would kind of represent this, not only just the stakeholders, the various parties, but also kind of have a more transparent view on what the rules are and the enforcement, I think would, go a long way towards ameliorating a lot of concerns from the various parties, either the community boards, brick and mortar shops, even the vendors themselves, just having one authority that they would speak to, I think would go, solve a lot of issues.
I agree with that.
So, what next?
So this is the first part of the conversation. So, as Cody knows from like executive committee, one of my intentions has been to start this conversation and to get all of the stakeholders involved with it to come talk to us. And as you mentioned, forum was a possibility too, just to see kind of like what the pulse is in the community and with other business owners, so I think that's a very important part of the conversation as well. So I appreciate you attending as well and giving your input on that, because that's also something that we need to be aware of too, because obviously any legislative change on that end affects your livelihood and impacting the community too. So I want to get the conversation started. I also want to get this like in our heads as we think about as we walk on the streets, as we talk to our street vendors, whatever. If where we sort of like stand on this piece of legislation, because it is impactful and this is what our committee focuses on. So I think it's important for us to take a stance on it one way or the other, or to provide our input on it as well if we're not happy with what we see.
I just want to thank you, Matt, so
yeah,
much
thanks
for
again.
coming.
Yeah, happy to come. I was supposed to bring one of our members, Julia, who actually sells on 14th Street and lives on 14th Street. Her and her husband have a fruit and vegetable stand, but unfortunately her husband's really sick. He's in the hospital lately, so she wasn't able to come. But next time, if there's something bigger, we can bring some of our members and happy to talk more. So whatever you guys need, I have some cards here. I'll leave them. Thanks again for inviting me.
All right, thanks again to you and the Street Vendor Project, and also thanks for SEMA for coordinating this as well. And this was a last minute request, so I appreciate you coming out on Thursday night.
And if there's ever any issues, like specific location issues, just email me or call me and we'll see what we can do. Cool.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Is that the 14th and 1st?
They might be between, no, they're further down between 1st and A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's that.
Hey, thanks. Nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I know.
All
You guys want to give these to other?
Yeah, we'll keep those.
Okay,
we'll
great.
keep those,
All right, thanks. Feel free to reach out. Nice meeting you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Take care.
So I'm waiving my chair's report. I don't have a report, but we do have old and new business. So like, yeah, and feel free to come to the table too.
Thank you.
And you as well, if you'd like to come to the table. Again, just introduce yourself.
Yeah. Table type situation or?
Yeah, we'll do it. It's just us. So
Keep it casual.
Yeah.
And the one viewer on the internet.
Hi viewer.
Hi.
Yeah.
So my name is Alex Anopoulos. As I noted earlier, my family's operated restaurants in CD6 for about 40 years now, a little bit more than 40 actually. So we currently have 4 locations. 3 of them are called The Mill, which is my brother and I's concept, and then my father used to have used to be called Oxford Cafe actually, and so we've kind of transitioned. I came a couple times last year to the community board to discuss street fairs, specifically sort of the process at one of our locations, 52nd and Lex. What's happened over the past couple of years is, basically the main reason I'm here is that the past 2.5 weeks there's been 5 street fairs. 4 of them, one on a Sunday closing the avenue, which is fine, but the 4 others have been during the week closing the block. 3 of them were now 3 consecutive Fridays, including tomorrow. Our block, 52nd, between Lex and 3rd, is closed again, and it's just a lot of events again and again, and the issues that I've raised in the past still stand in terms of sort of nuisance. A lot of our regulars always complain that whenever these events occur, they just don't come by, and it's true. I mean, I just see it in sales. It just immediately drops. The events themselves for our facilities are, a lot of customers from the street fair will come in, try to use our restroom or try to eat food in our facilities. I don't pay my employees to basically monitor all these people to, I don't want to be rude and kick them out, but at some point it's also disrespectful for my other customers and also my employees. There's a lot of debris, smoke. A lot of these guys come in, with huge smokers, things like that. My understanding generally is that there's 2 legacy permits, if you will, Mardi Gras Productions and then Midtown Munchies, I think is the other one. Mardi Gras, I actually met one of the representatives last week, and he was very forthcoming and respectful, kind of trying to understand the issues, which I appreciated. Midtown Munchies in the past has been exceptionally rude to myself and my brother and my managers. Another issue that was kind of interesting listening to the representative from the Street Vendor Project is that every other operation in the area now isn't mom and pop. So one of the reasons why I'm the only person here is because all the other operations are national chains.
Corporate.
So corporate, I'll speak to the store location manager. They'll just be like, I'll raise the issue up, but nobody will care, or nobody will come. It's just kind of another another matter that just kind of goes by the wayside just because of the size. Obviously for us it's much different since we're smaller. For us it's a very sensitive matter. I think my concern is, obviously like there is some demand for I'm not saying that there isn't, but the issue is, during the week on sort of one of the busiest streets in the city, just basically shutting it down so many times within such a concentrated period, shows to me that the process is fundamentally broken and there's no oversight or consideration, let's say, for what's going on. I understand that the permits do go through the city. Again, there is a process, but there just isn't enough oversight on the process. Another thing that I learned, actually, I met from the same 17th precinct, the detective who's kind of responsible for consumer affairs. He noted that he was actually not notifying our building. We're actually one of the few low-rise buildings in the area. It's kind of, classic Midtown Manhattan's air rights sold, big building goes next door. So he hadn't been notifying kind of our landlord, which is also why we had been blindsided a little bit. So we established a rapport with him. He's also a customer at our restaurant, so it was, it worked out. But, I think for us, I understand that there is a process, there is the demand, there are these other kind of broader issues in terms of the functionality of the streetscape, different issues that we're talking about today. And, what is the best use for the space? What is the impact on all kind of local individuals and entities that kind of operate within this neighborhood? And for me right now, it just feels like the process isn't really listening to my concerns. And I'm coming in just kind of trying to understand what's going on and how these issues can be raised more effectively.
Yeah. So I remember you attending the previous meetings. We actually have a lot of new members here, so it's good for you to come back and talk about these issues too, because as everyone knows, like street activities, street fairs has been a big topic that we've brought up several times, particularly because of issues like the ones that you've mentioned. For more specific knowledge, and I think for the new members as well, you were talking about decreased sales, issues on sanitation. Do you have more specific, like you don't have to give us, price points, but if you have percentages and seeing, like what a typical day is compared to when it, street fairs,
so like on a lunch, let's say like our lunch on a kind of typical, these Fridays are a bit unique as well, just because.
And is it worse on a weekday than is a weekend?
Yeah, for sure. Our business caters to kind of regulars. We're focused on sort of office kind of. That's kind of. Like on a typical Friday, we'll probably be doing 30% less business when this is street fair is. So. It is a big impact, but
especially with the frequency. It's
each time, each Friday. That's kind of obviously right now. This is kind of why it's a little bit more sensitive, just because it's been so many different of these events basically within 2.5 weeks during the week.
There goes your margin.
Yeah, you basically just hammered me. But my sensitivity also though is, just what is the point? These events are supposed to be driven by the community. They're sponsored by entities from the community, and none of these organizations there, or like the vendors, are from the community, if you will. It's not like I have a stand there, and every single other store we came together and formed a street fair. And we're like, we're going to have a block party or something, which is what traditionally, like in the past, it was. It's actually these weird corporate entities that have these legacy permits that are creating these, and I understand like these vendors are individuals with businesses like just like me, that's fine. But it also feels like there is abuse going on and there needs to be better oversight. And like just in terms of like nuisance, people coming in, a lot of dirt and debris. I've seen some really traffic. One year when we were renovating
2 years ago, there was a lot of these, and it was just very difficult for, let's say, my contractors to find parking, or just to do normal kind of day-to-day Monday to Friday.
Yeah, I mean, we
business.
even talked about, I mentioned at one point how we hate that there are long avenues, because that really screws over everything rather than on streets,
Right.
from like east to west rather than like north to south. But out of curiosity, say you did want to have a booth at one of these street fairs, are you able to do so, or what would the cost be? What would
I've
just
got-
out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten into the specifics. I was talking about this with Cody earlier, actually. I met an individual, Alex, from Mardi Gras, who was very, very kind. And, you know, he actually ended up clearing the space, you know, kind of entrance into because the store location has 2 entrances, one on Lexington Avenue and one on 52nd Street. So, you know, he actually offered and kind of, I'm not really sure what the process would be if I would need to get a separate permit or, you know, to actually like have the street, you know, put up a stall, let's say. You know, I've never really explored it. Maybe.
I don't think you should have to do that, but I was just wondering
Yeah,
if you.
but he actually extended that offer. So, but the other munchies did not. They were just more kind of
dismissive.
Dismissive.
Yeah, because one of the things that we took on about 2 years ago for those in the committee was, so just so people understand the process, there's an office with the city called Street Activities Permit Office, SAPO. And essentially, as Alex mentioned, there's a certain number of licenses or permits that they have per year that actually just continue each year. So no new applicant can actually come in and say, hey, like I want to do a block party on 52nd. It's whoever had a permit the year before can apply for the permit the year after.
Right?
Yeah, which essentially there was a each year they talk about a moratorium on street activities, which we agree with in terms of how many street activities you can have, but it's only open to applicants who had a permit the year before, which means it's the same thing each year. And so for the first time in a long time, about 2 years ago, we actually voted against it because we said no new applicants could come in, because one of these solutions, potential solutions that we saw, was that if the businesses themselves wanted to hold a block party or like a food fest or whatever it was, they could do so, because that's, you know, up to you, and that would actually, you know, be good for you as well. But the city didn't pass it itself, and they do that every year. And as you know from conversations that we've had, we've been trying to be more strict on these as well. So the same way that we review applicants for liquor license, we were talking about reviewing street activities as well. But the issue with that is even if we rejected it, it would still pass the city. So that's one of the things that I think we need to take into consideration too, which we've talked about in the past too, if you want to have hearings on these street activities, but I think also hearing from local businesses, we might want to take a position on this about reforming the system and maybe, you know, actually pulling together some of our local officials to do something to change the system.
Yeah, so I'm actually meeting with Councilmember Power's office on Tuesday next week, and I met with them extensively last summer as well. So, you know, and I spoke to Sapo, I don't know, I mean, it must have been half a dozen times last summer. You know, and I have no problem kind of continuing talking. I think what's frustrating for me though is kind of, it has, like, you know, the nature of the beast now has gotten to the point where the market, let's say just like the brick and mortar retail market has just become, especially in Midtown Manhattan, has transformed to just more and more corporate national offices. And, you know, oftentimes a lot of these are kind of privately held and they're chasing kind of a growth story a la Lyft or Uber. So they're maintaining storefronts that are basically loss making to continue sort of the illusion of a massive success. So it's just like such a weird landscape right now. You know, when I'm reaching out, let's say like a Dig-In who's on the street, and you know, and it's their stakeholders or those individuals who are there aren't, you know,
invested.
Yeah, it's not for them. It is, but it just isn't, because it's just, it's not
their purview, let's say,
Yeah.
as a corporate employee. So it is kind of, I mean, for me, it's fascinating. I mean, obviously the city always changes, but it is, you know, this particular instance for me, just with the way the structure is and just kind of learning more with the legacy nature of the permitting, and also just, you know, the ad hoc nature where, you know, if they're able to get a kind of community rep to sign up for an entity or whatever, and like all of a sudden, you know, it just goes through, but it doesn't really have that community input to actually feel like it's something like an event for all the buildings, let's say.
Same way I asked previous representative, what would be on your wish list? Like, what would, if you, and you don't need to be PC about this or nice about this, like, what would be helpful to you?
Well, I think, you know, obviously, in the past, I didn't have a relationship with the detective at the 17th precinct, so I think that helps just having a point of contact, because he's technically responsible. So I think just from that end, the communication will improve going forward. But I think there needs to be, you know, having so many events in such a concentrated period, to me, at that point, it's not really a special event or an event that's kind of driven to celebrate. It just becomes, you know, a matter of normal business. And if that's the case, then they should be regulated as such, which would mean, you know, much more strict DOH standards, much stricter sort of sanitation, much more police presence to organize kind of the sidewalks, cleaning, things like that. You know, I think that it would have to be, the standards would have to elevate a lot more.
Does SAPO or anybody track anything like the revenue that goes through these, you know?
So this is also the part of the right about reviewing. The street fairs was to see, like, is the money actually going back into the community? Like, where is the money going? Things like that. Yeah.
So a portion of the revenue goes to the community sponsor. CB6 is sponsoring a street fair next week on 44th Street. We will get whatever the percentage agreement is with Mardi Gras does our street fair. We will get a percentage when the fair is over. They mail us a check. So it's supposed to, that's why it requires a community sponsor, so that a certain percentage goes back to it. One of the fairs that impacted Alex's business was the 17th Precinct Community Council sponsored it. So they use their money. They're a community organization.
But there were 5, you said there were 5 street fairs, if I took my notes correctly over the last
So
what were the sponsors of the other 4?
You know, I'll have to, I have to shoot.
We could check that.
I can look.
Because he gives me a list of them, so.
I think, you know, the street fairs bother me a little bit also because, you know, there are these private operators that seem to be doing pretty well running street fairs. And granted, there are community organizations that back them and get, you know, a piece of the action. But there should be, a street fair should not be allowed to occur when it jams up traffic up to, you know, 96th Street on 2nd Avenue. Because it runs on 2nd Avenue up to maybe 55th Street. And the outflow from the Queensboro Bridge has
No, I know exactly.
Or on 42nd and 3rd.
I lived through that,
yeah. And it just seems like such a burden or an imposition, not only on the businesses like you, but everybody who lives there.
Or even the normal street vendors. So, like, you know, we were talking about before, so there's 3 guys who've been there for, I don't know, 20 plus years. Like, they use our restrooms and we have a relationship with them. And, you know, one of them's a fruit guy, and, you know, he was complaining about it too, because when that event occurs on the street where he is every day and has been for all these years, you know, his business just gets destroyed because a lot of his regulars either don't use that exit coming from the subway or just won't walk around there. So like even for the actual street vendors, you know, that we were just discussing for half an hour earlier, like it's an issue for them too. So it's,
is there any organization in terms of other like
small business
I mean, I know like there are official things, but which is a lot different, right? Because like a bid will, you know, sort of operate differently or has different interests. But
Right.
are there, you know, sort of like you personally, are you part of, or have you organized yourself like a group of business owners or street vendors who? Because like, what would be helpful for us, like
Yeah.
if we, you know, whatever opinion that we take on this, if we have like a petition, if we have a letter signed by all these local businesses in a certain area, if there's some sort of organization, that gives us a stronger sort of backing to take action on this, where we can say, hey, like, this needs attention, you know, like, look at all the businesses, we are supporting small businesses, but where's the support?
Yeah, I'm gonna, I mean, there are entities, I'm not that active within them.
Yeah. Because, like, to be honest, I was like, you're the only one who's actually shown up to talk against against street fairs, even though we've all personally observed it.
Yeah. I think part of it is that issue with a lot of this, you know, whereas let's say like even a decade or 15 years ago, the stakeholders like on that street would have been, you know, a lot of people similar to me. Also another thing, you know, 15, 20 years ago, there were only 3 restaurants on that corner. Now I think there's 17. So like, it just shows what I was saying before in terms of just the saturation of food and beverage within sort of the brick and mortar landscape. I think on my part, kind of what I'm going to do, especially after a meeting next week, I'm going to renew my initiative to kind of reach out to the individual restaurants in the street and try to, because they've all voiced negative.
Yeah. I can't imagine them.
Yeah,
being
I mean,
positive.
it wasn't like I went and they were like, oh yeah, it's great.
We love them.
Yeah, that's best day of the year. But yeah, so I'm gonna try to put together sort of some sort of either documenting or a letter or something like that, just kind of.
Yeah, because I think the more organization with that, the better. And also, like, if you would like for me to attend as the chair with that meeting too, or you want to like report back, that's something I'm totally
yeah,
open
no,
to
I
as
appreciate
well.
it. I'll reach out via Cody and.
We're on our end. We're looking into reaching out to the city agencies who are permitting these, not SAPO, like that. On top of the SAPO process, they have to get DOH permits and things. So to see, I mean, if there was smoke and debris, that's
Which
got to be
is, right?
got to be against.
But it's like, even aside from that, say even that they were perfectly compliant with every sanitation
Sure.
and health code
Right.
in the book.
That's something that at
installation,
least we can do now, right?
Yeah.
That the office has already been doing, like reaching out to these agencies to see what their inspection process is, what their.
Because I have been personally pissed off with street fairs for a long time, not just because of the inconvenience, but also because of the diversity of it. Like, where are local businesses represented?
Yeah.
Why, you know, aren't percentages like for the inconvenience to you for the whole day that you're losing business?
It is like a weird motley crew of kind of operators who go with these two, you know, organizations that they just kind of bring in.
And if you had them, I mean, in like, again, as I was mentioning with the previous, the street vendor, if you had them in food deserts or places that were completely empty, where, you know, actually would be a draw.
Yeah, like a
like,
actual effort to support the community in some way.
But I don't see it. It's always on a very busy block where there are a bunch of other restaurants that then have to close. Because it's probably not worth it to pay employees the entire day when no one's walking in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing with, you know, obviously, like, I think sometimes people will focus on sort of the vendors as, but, you know, for me, like that location, you know, we support 30 families. You know, we've had people who've been working at that location for almost 30 years. You know, and for us, like, you know, it's a team effort there. So, you know, everybody, this doesn't just impact me as the owner, it also impacts my team and, you know, my workers and my colleagues and things like that. So, you know, I think sometimes these narratives get, just especially through like social media, there's like always like a focus on kind of one side or the other, or injustice, and like it's much more complicated. You know, there's a lot of different individuals who get impacted one way or the other. I think there just needs to be more sensitivity to that.
Wanted to say something?
Just an observation, I've seen street fairs where the establishment builds a deck out into the street, like a bar, restaurant type of thing, and they take part.
Yeah.
And that would add to the community feel of it. But I think that if you're going to be impacted by a street fair, there should probably be some kind of law that says you shouldn't have to pay, you know? But if that's the case, then what impact will that have on the street fair itself?
Well, that's what I was gonna say, if you do that, for example, on 42nd and Third,
Every establishment will be like, all right.
exactly, yeah, they're gonna,
No,
that's
I
what
mean,
it's gonna be.
Yeah, so, I mean,
But also, like, how many, like, euros and corn on the cob and, like, slushies can you have every,
Lemonade.
like, 2 stands, yeah, like.
But you can crosstown streets.
Well, that's what I was saying, I was like, that would be, like, to
No.
me, I was like, the thing that really bothered me was when they had it on Third Avenue and all the traffic, like, there was an ambulance I couldn't get through. And I was like, God forbid, like, I don't know if that person got the help that they needed, right? But I was like, if instead of doing it across Third Avenue and 42nd Street, if they had done it on like 43rd Street, because they already have that plaza there, right, in front of the church. If you did it on 43rd, 44th, 45th.
the Armenian church.
Oh no, the Catholic on 43rd and
Oh, so I
between
thought you
Lex
said,
and,
34th. then.
Oh no, like 43rd.
Yeah.
If they did 43rd, 44th, 45th, like you could have this sort of walk because like no one's going through Grand Central. So even the configuration of that is in terms of like space and things like that.
Bad idea, that corner,
But it's very hard for us to like stop it, like, because the city has already approved it. So.
You know where you see a lot of the participation from the restaurants is the San Gennaro piece, you know? They'll come out
Yeah.
of the street.
Or even ones in Brooklyn, I feel like, in Park Slope or in different areas. My girlfriend lives in Dennis Park, and you know, there's a much more. What I was trying to say before, there's a much more sort of actual neighborhood engagement rather than sort of a facade kind of.
Yeah, and different neighborhoods have like taste of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That we had one in Midtown for the, you know.
Like
for a
my dream
while.
has always been like a, I don't know,
And
I
you
always
would have-
screw up the pronunciation, like a smorgasbord
Smorgasbord.
or whatever, like in like our
Well,
neighborhood of like
we-
all the
we had
local
half a
businesses,
dozen-
cause like we have such interesting food.
Most of the booths were local restaurants that were using it as a chance to, you know,
Yeah.
build up business, and we went,
Which I think
we had
that's
good
what it should
food,
be,
and we
yeah.
went to the restaurant, you know, it worked.
Yeah, well, definitely.
You know, you may have a couple big ones, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, they've been around forever. But there should probably be,
It's like no one buys their socks from street fairs anymore. You know, like no one
Yeah.
does that. But that's all you see. Like yeah.
Half the vendors are also like selling fidget spinners and stuff,
Yeah.
and like it is really absurd on some level.
So, all right.
Thank you
Well, keep us
very
posted
Yeah,
with
sure.
your progress.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
appreciate
anytime,
it.
because like obviously we're all in the same building. If I can't attend, maybe Cody could attend or something. Or
Yeah,
we could
Keith,
come
Keith's
after.
2 floors down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, next. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually realize.
So Keith and then
okay.
Senator
Yeah.
Kruger is
We can,
here.
Kruger as well.
we can walk down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. that is
So
great.
just keep us posted on everything.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you as well.
All right. Sorry.
No, all good. Thanks
Last
for
but
staying
not
so
least,
late.
yeah.
So today I'm here to talk about something very specific. Before I start, are you guys aware of or heard of Bar 263? Is that a name that has come through? here at
Yeah,
all?
I've been on the email, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Bar 263 basically is a bar that's located on 26th Street in between 3rd and Lex. And my family, we're building owners, we're essentially neighbors to them. The first thing that I just handed out, you
And
know,
could I just, for the record, have your name?
yes, Wesley Shao, S-H-I-A-U. So there are 3 things I'm passing out. The first thing that I'm passing out is something that directly contradicts what they had told you guys, and you guys can read the minutes when they applied for their liquor license.
Thanks, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
What they had told you originally, what, you know, you had asked how frequently will you have DJs, to what extent will you guys be a disturbance to, you know, the neighbors. Very similar to what you guys have already discussed, and I've seen you guys ask questions to a lot of the people that have come here today, frankly. So that first thing I passed out is basically a schedule, and this is public information. They advertised and had DJs at their location. So when they applied initially, they said they would have occasional DJs. You know, this that goes to show right now, they've had it basically half, half of the month. Yeah, Bar 263.
And then we're in your motion, the same.
So yeah, so 201 is us.
Right there.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's us.
And you own that entire building.
Exactly.
Right.
And the issue that they have caused you know, there's a personal level to it because my grandparents used to live in that building. You know, they're 80 years old. They've had to since move out because the noise that they cause every day, basically every night, is just, you know, there's no way anybody getting their liquor license approved under that context, it would never happen. So that brings me to my second point. You know, the second thing that I have passed out, you know, is all the noise violations that have happened in the past year. So there are 80 violations on here, and that translates to about, you know, a violation every 5 days. And, you know, what's most striking to me, if you look at the top left, the close date, if you look at some of the times on these violations, I mean, it's 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 3 a.m. And the reason these violations are happening is because they don't close their door when, you know, at 2 a.m. in the morning. They'll have a DJ until 2 a.m. with the door wide open, blasting music out into the street. And then from 2 to 4 a.m., when the DJ's gone, they'll have a jukebox playing, again, blasting music into the street. And there's just an incredible amount of noise pollution to the point where my grandparents, again, my parents, we live in California, my parents do, they had to move out here, not move, but they had to fly out here to help move my grandparents into a new building. Because, you know, the point that we're at now is this has really been escalated beyond, you know, what we've tried to do as a good neighbor. You know, we talked to the building owner and he says he's sorry, and I'm sure he is sorry to a certain extent. Nobody wants to be a bad neighbor, but not sorry enough where he actually changes everything because, you know, something changes for a week and, you know, next thing you know, the door's open again. And so beyond the noise, you know, at 2 a.m. people come home, you know, sometimes I come home from work, you know, people have thrown up, urinated, thrown cigarette butts all over our front doorstep. And again, like, we've tried to say, let's be a good neighbor, can you please do it this way? Maybe close your door, like that should be step one. But beyond that, you know, can you move your sign closer to your driveways or your entryway so you're not in front of, you know, 201, so our tenants can access their space.
Have they been responsive and respectful to your
again,
inquiries?
At the beginning, they always are. I mean, they say, sorry for causing an issue, we'll change. So, you know, maybe they change for a week, but now we have no tenants living in our building, and this is the sole source of income for my grandparents.
And do you live in that building too, or
we used to live in that building. We've also moved out. Okay. So, you know, this is a true family issue.
So where do you live now?
So, I've moved into the apartment below my grandparents in the building because, you know,
and that's not in the state.
No, that's about 5 blocks up.
Okay.
So a big motivation for my family is, you know, working in New York City, I'm able to be close to my grandparents and, you know, provide some sort of support for them. So when they had to move, I had to move so that I could be close to them and, you know, basically be there in case they need anything. But, you know, beyond the fact that they're, you know, just creating huge issues for everybody on the block. I don't know if I passed out this change.org, but, you know, we're the ones that
right here. Yeah.
We're the ones next door though. You know, we get the urine. Yeah, we're the sunflower guy. You know, we get the urine, we get throw up, we get the cigarette butts, we get the direct noise pollution. I mean, they're blasting noise right into my brother's ex room. He used to be right there, that second air conditioning unit. But if you look at the petition, there's at least like 75 signatures on here where we are not the only people being affected by that. And frankly, nobody has time, no one person has time to file a complaint every 5 days, right? This is clearly.
So I was actually going to ask you, like, how many of these are unique individuals, or how many?
That I don't know. It looks like it. Yeah. So this was pulled off the 311 website.
The bar, the entire building, the 2 floors, or is it?
They're just the ground floor retail space where you just walk up.
It's a walk up.
But there's a 2-floor building. What's on top of it?
Probably more residential. And so they're probably a big component of these complaints as well. But we haven't spoken directly to them, frankly. We've spoken high level to Cody about it. I think he's been aware of the issue for a while. And we have video surveillance of all of this happening.
You said that.
Yeah.
That's
So
it right there.
This is a tool that was
203.
created that aggregates all of the licenses, whether you can see the let me click on that. You can see grade histories, so the flags are a Department of Health records. Anytime you see the bar glass here, that's a liquor license. The green is a sidewalk cafe, and the blue are 311 complaints that you can click on and are dated. So within the last 6 weeks, there's probably 8 to 12 there.
And my brother and I moved out about a month ago, so we're not even the ones calling these complaints
Yeah.
anymore. And so our recommendation, we think the next course of action should be, having already talked to them, trying to be good neighbors, clearly they're not listening, the fact that they're disturbing not just us, but everybody around us. Their liquor license needs to be renewed next month.
Were they supposed to show up today?
No, we asked them to come.
Next
Because, was it your mom who reached out to me?
Yep.
I spoke to her kind of after we had set the agenda for this meeting, so I asked them to come to the next month's meeting, which they've agreed to.
I mean, they have to anyway.
But their license is set to renew. Our 30-day window closes before BASA meets.
Right. When's the last time you spoke to them?
Personally, so I probably spoke to them maybe 3-4 months ago.
And that was in person or by phone or email?
I spoke to them in person, but I also know my dad. He basically runs the day-to-day of the building. He lives in California. He speaks to them by phone a lot, but since he's come, most specifically knowing that the license is becoming due, we got into not an argument, but we basically said to them, we're going to start litigating against you. But I think that would be the next step beyond even this step. Like, no one wants to really spend those dollars and get to that point. When there's structure in the community that deals with these kinds of issues, I think that's like the first step that should happen. Like the fifth step after trying to speak to them.
Yeah, I spoke to, speak to the folks at the Liquor Authority about a variety of things on a weekly, monthly basis. Given that they have not issued any violations on their end for this establishment currently.
Legally, they can't do anything.
I mean, I don't know that they legally can, but they are probably at precedent not going to.
That's what he said, legally, you can't do anything.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he said legally we can't go against them.
That they're not going to revoke a license just from zero, not 311, those are separate, right? From they send out an inspector from the State Liquor Authority who issues a violation to the establishment. They're not going to revoke it the first time, but they will, if as you know, set up a plan, document, there's a whole chain of attempts from the community board, then they're more likely to revoke a license.
Would this be considered revoking the license or simply not renewing the license? Because
So at the end of the day, right, the community board is an advisory committee. So we, procedurally how it works is obviously we're meeting a committee now. And we vote on, as you saw, right, we vote on an applicant one way or the other. And then that's brought to the full board during our full board meeting. So it's every second Wednesday of the month. We then present our votes and findings to the full board, which then votes on it, and then an official position from the community board is presented to whatever governing body. So if it's a sidewalk case, for example, it goes to DCA with the city. If it's a liquor license, it would go to the State Liquor Authority. Now, at the end, it's still an advisory, we're not determining the law, we're not determining the license. It is essentially a comment or a recommendation to the State Liquor Authority. Usually, they'll comply with whatever the recommendation of the full board is. But for example, if we rejected any of these applicants today, they could still apply to the SLA and say, hey, we want the liquor license, and that technically the SLA could still approve them, even though we've rejected them, right? So that's what Cody was getting at too, where it would be very against precedent, or I don't know how they would technically go against it if we said no based on this, and they say, well, there have been no official violations.
So just on that point, just to confirm, you're saying because this is the first time it's come up officially to the liquor license authority, there would need to be at least a precedent from you guys before they could revoke it.
So not a precedent from us.
So the State Liquor Authority has inspectors of their own, right? They get called in on a variety of things.
Is that in relation? Sorry.
generally, what will happen is 311, you call 311, that triggers the local precinct to send someone out. Whenever it says case closed, that means that the cop sent an officer by, and if it was case closed, they didn't observe any noise, and they go away. If the precinct has the ability and the relationship with the liquor authority to say, we need you to send some inspectors here, like there's this. Generally that happens less with noise and more in cases where it's
Underage drinking or something.
underage drinking or prostitution.
Yeah.
Remember there was the
I don't think that's happening here, but.
there was the claim of
Yeah.
what was it? That bar, the LGBT bar in the district, where that sent inspectors to it. So they can then issue violations as the licensing authority to these.
So yeah, so what I normally do in situations like this is I would have met with you two individually, and technically we could still do that, but here's my fear about that. I would have met them individually like I have and like mediated this before. We've had issues like this before where, you know, there's been an establishment who's up for renewal in like 6 months or whatever, and the community had issues with it. And I give them an action plan and I say you have to do X, Y, and Z, and they're very strict. The issue that I have with doing that now is like they could just do that for a month, right? And then we would put ourselves in a bind because then when they're up for renewal, they'll say, hey, you know, we complied with everything that you said for the last, whatever, 30 days, and then continue thing for the next
more
year.
time. I was wrong.
What?
Their license expires at the end of July.
Oh, end of July?
Yeah, I thought it was end of June. That's why.
Can I, if you have that in front of you, can I ask you a question?
Sure, yeah.
So when do they have, can they be open until, what are their hours of operation?
So that's not stated on this. This is just.
I believe they had a 4, right?
They have a 4.
Notice they have to send this
They've
standardized
been around
notice
for a
form.
while. Because the last time
I
they were up
sent
for
it-
renewal, I wasn't even the chair of the committee.
I sent it to you.
I thought they were pretty new, like within the past 2 years.
Yeah, because you said it was like more recently.
Yeah,
There was
this
like.
this is very new.
Because the last time they came up, I wasn't the chair of this committee, and I remember we've had some conversations.
Was it the same
about it.
location?
It was the same location, yeah.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
trying to remember, like, because like when I was new to the committee, I don't know if like they had been there before,
It's,
or if they were new.
203 East 26.
260.
So we've had this
63.
building for.
No, it's 203.
Oh, that's
We've had this building for at least 20 years.
Yeah, that's
I
what's
don't
interesting.
think that they've like left and then come back. I mean, this is a
Is it under new management?
No, so here's the, they applied, they came in March, 2017, and they didn't show up, and a negative resolution was drafted. And then they showed up the following month.
In March 2017 was when they were, I guess, asked for their license.
Their
for the
yes.
time.
That was their first
And they
license.
have a 2 a.m.
They have it 2 a.m.
The establishment will close at 2 a.m. Thursday to Sunday.
Do they close at 2 a.m.? In your
I don't.
experience?
I mean, I've come home like from going out myself past 2 a.m. and, you know, they're still open. I wouldn't.
Because also, like, because you're talking about the noise complaints that were like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Is it like, here's my question too, what's their capacity?
The capacity is tiny. I mean,
And I
it's-
mean, do they have, is it like generally
50.
packed, or are they just playing music like this, like?
Generally,
just play
it's
it?
usually just like a group of, you know, maybe 5 to 10 regulars, and they're just blasting music out.
So yeah, so some of the videos like which actually like I looked at their Instagram too, and I sent you a couple of the Instagram stuff
They're-
too.
They're, yeah.
They're what?
Bison.
Wait, what?
They're supposed to close their doors and windows by 10 p.m. according to their, when they filed with us.
Yeah, well, 10 p.m. That's
Occasional DJ and occasional pre-recorded music is what they wrote down, which
It's not
the evidence
occasional.
shows is not occasional. And that's really all we got from that.
Shoot, where was I?
You were saying they may have been here for a while, the last time you were
No,
here.
that wasn't it.
Do you Instagram?
Instagram, yes, thank you. So they have like their, I don't know if they advertise themselves as this, but I see that they have a lot of like drag shows that go on there, and there's one video which I think you also made the picture for the change petition was actually like the event or whatever like went out onto the street. It's like the middle of the street where there's like dancing and blasting of music, and I don't know what time that was, but regardless, so it's like that type of vibe.
You want to show them?
Yeah, we actually I forgot.
Yeah. So this guy, front door up the stairs, and they go.
Yeah, so it's actually, there's two doors. There's the front, sorry, hold on 1 second. There's the front door to the building, but then they have their own personal door. Like, let's say you were a resident, let's say this was the front door and you had your own residence door.
Yeah.
It's the exact same way, except they prop their residence door open and this door.
Okay. It's very clubby in a way, so.
Surprisingly so, and I think the issue is the fact that
If that's a door that leads to residential buildings, even though they have their own separate door, isn't it illegal to keep it propped open?
See, like what, I don't, because you don't own that building, right?
We do not.
What they technically could have done, they might have bought the apartments upstairs.
Or it's empty.
Or it's empty, yeah.
Or they were just sent 5 years.
Or just go to their Instagram. It was on their Instagram. No, this is the loitering. This is not the dancing.
You want, what do you want?
The dancing. So just Instagram bar 263. Because it'll also show you the advertising.
Are you a corner building or is that?
we are the corner.
Yeah, so just click on
Sunflower
the name.
Diner was
Yeah, but they were
our old tenant.
So yeah, look at the first one.
Yeah.
No, I thought Sunflower was just like, it's still there?
No,
it's gone.
they're gone now.
Yeah.
So the building's empty
The building is now completely empty.
because of this?
Well, the Sunflower was a separate issue, but for our
Actually, I can-
residents.
Yes.
The Sunflower Diner was, so we had a fire maybe 5 years ago, and they fell back on their rent, and my grandparents, they don't really speak English, they're not too, on top of these things. The Sunflower Diner never fully, paid their rent in arrears, basically, so they had 5 months in arrears.
I was
So
just
they
thinking
never
of
able to pay
college.
that back. And so then once we tried to litigate against them to say, you need to pay
So you
us,
see,
or,
like, they had, like,
we
liabilities,
need to
right?
evict you, and that went
Yeah.
on for about a year. So clearly they weren't gonna pay rent for the year that we were, in a lawsuit against
Right.
each other. So basically by the end, when they finally, I think the owner took
Also, you
bankruptcy,
broke
so
too.
he didn't have to pay anything. But he was about over a year behind it.
So you were out, year and a half, right?
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
And for commercial space, that's significant.
Do you think that'd be enough time for them to actually approve? Or would that be too short a period where they could say, okay, look, for 2 months we'll be good?
Well, I don't know, because if they've been bad for a whole year, why should they be given an opportunity for 2 or 3, how many years it might be? Why should they be?
So it's not about, so.
And if they lied on their, I don't know. if
It's a
they did,
small
but if
space, they don't have
So
a
it's
lot
not,
of
yeah,
space.
so the tactic behind that is not to give them a chance.
every Thursday.
Yeah. It's not to like give them a chance to fix it, it's, I'm betting on them not being able to do it, so that gives us a stronger,
You just have to know.
argument to say like they didn't comply with this at all.
So I hear from them too, maybe.
They're coming next.
Yeah. And you'll be
Yeah,
back,
but they're gonna
right?
say,
Yeah.
but that's
Here,
short
I'll
of
be
the time
here,
period,
my mom will
right?
be here.
Cause like,
But frankly, we'd like them to be here so that we can, to your point, I think we're past the point of having an action plan almost, but I think it would be important to have a mediator for these discussions so that, I don't wanna say witnesses, but, there are other people that can acknowledge that these conversations have already been had.
no, I mean, that's why I usually mediate them.
Yeah.
But then the thing is, like, that again puts us in a bind because if we, for example, say they show up at the
Yeah.
next month's meeting and they're like, we're so sorry, we're gonna approve, blah, 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 right? Then if they actually do it for 30 days, it doesn't give us something to like vote against them on, right?
And if they said they're closing the door at 10, they don't, and they're open till 4 when they're supposed to close at 2, those things are important.
But then they'll just say they didn't.
We don't have proof.
Yeah, I don't have proof of that. Yeah.
And this isn't, like, their Instagram isn't considered proof that it says every Thursday a party goes till 4?
Well, I took, I sent.
Does the Instagram say till 4 a.m.?
I thought it did.
Do we have sound on this?
Could it be that it is 4?
We're not sound in. Where's the, they were like dancing in the street.
If you get here before 2 a.m., you'll get $1 beers.
It's a great deal.
It's a great deal. Drag show every Friday night, 9 to 12.
Yeah, they usually just talk about the start, right?
I think the issue really is, this would not be an issue if it were on the avenues. I mean, we're on Third Avenue, you know, there's a restaurant every lot, basically.
No, but it's also it's a residential area, and this is like
now, and, you know, people are being bothered by it.
I think this is really
fair
I
enough.
don't care what they use it for, I just, you know, they're bothering the neighborhood.
I'm almost just trying to play devil's advocate with myself, you know. To your point exactly, I just think it's made worse by the fact that it is on the street. I agree.
Is it your email that's open?
Yes.
Can you check the email I sent you?
Do the next tab. That's not mine. That's general.
This is, which is I sent you an email.
And Kyle, again, just for my knowledge, can we like pass them? Like, cause I mean, they said that they.
So I asked
had
Cody to
no-
send all of this to the SLA so that they have record of significant complaints.
This is what you sent me.
I sent you a bunch, right?
Yeah, okay.
Where's the next one?
Monday is 8 to 1.
So yeah, so like they said no live music, right? So microphone, live
Well,
music.
They said occasional DJ and also have that.
Well, we should post it, if there's a turnout from the residents on the block, that'll be telling. You know?
So I guess they got rid of that one.
Yeah.
Where they're jumping in the street.
I mean, should we open some of the, I don't know what we have on camera, is any of that meaningful or?
So like I looked at the videos, like was it Nest or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's compelling, because first of all, they can't tell that those are patrons from that bar, even though you can assume it.
Yeah.
It also doesn't look that bad
Sure.
compared to what you're actually enduring, especially because there's no
Noise maybe, sound?
not enough audio, because I couldn't hear anything.
Got it.
So it just looks like people smoking or whatever, and like for them to say, oh, you know, I just tell them no, put up a sign that says no smoking or whatever,
Right.
and it'll be fine. So I don't think like that would actually further your case.
It's expired. That's right.
Wait, it's fine when?
July 31st. And their license started September 2017, so this is right.
But they filed in March. So
Yeah.
yes, in September. Yeah, so I mean, my natural next step would be like within the next week to have you and the owner of them probably come here so that we can talk about it in person. But I mean, it also depends. I mean, I don't know like what the most strategic thing is, because like I'll just speak for myself. My inclination is to reject them for their renewal. So I don't know if we just do that when.
So.
Well, I'm talking to you because I want to know what would actually, because like I saw that email from SLA where they're saying, you know, like if legally there are no violations or something.
When I thought it expired at the end of June, I asked him if he could delay evaluating the renewal until you all had a chance to weigh in, because I thought our timeline was shorter. Now that I misread it and it's actually in July, you have the time to comment. But you don't have the time to make a plan and then give them 3 months to, you know.
I mean, I could put a plan together. I mean, it's relatively
But you
simple.
wouldn't
but,
have
like,
the time to evaluate it.
Exactly, yeah. So that, I mean, like, cause like 3 months is like an awkward time, right? Like, is that long enough? Is that too short?
I think we have another meeting, right, before this.
So they would come up in July. We would meet in July. Because we meet every month.
And that would be enough time for the committee to weigh in on it and for the neighborhood to be informed of the meeting. And if, even when one person shows up, it means something to me. And I've sometimes been the only person to say something about something. But, you know, if this is a problem on the block, you would expect that there would be other people that would have something to say about it. You could hear from the applicant or the license holder what they have to say about it. And then I think we'd be in a position to determine whether or not, you know, they should be renewed. But I think that SLA will do what they do, but if in fact, you know, it at that meeting, it turns out that if I believe that their noise is bothering the block, I would vote to reject them. I think that if the rest of the committee did too, that would mean something to the SLA.
Sure.
And is there any way, in the past, we've done things where people promise to do something for 6 months and then come back? Is there a way we could do that, or is that?
No, I mean, so we did that with, what was it called, Lexicon, and they failed to do that.
It just gets harder.
Right,
Yeah.
but would the SLA be able to delay that's the
No,
problem.
but
they're not
That's
gonna
the
give out,
problem.
they're not gonna give out a license. They can only give out the
Temporary,
license
yeah.
that's 2 years.
Yeah.
So they would,
Okay.
if you agree, if you came up
If
with
you
a
gave them
plan,
a license, it would be for 2
they
years.
would, and you say, like, we're okay with them renewing the license, but we're working on this plan, and then you could then, in 3 months' time, pass another resolution, but it's a lot harder.
Harder to change it then.
Trying
Yeah.
to
To
do
get,
something.
Right.
But here's also the thing too, like, I don't, like, based on, like, the number of complaints, the fact that, like, you've, in good faith, reached out and asked them to do things, like, I don't think they deserve to, like, have an action plan to give them, you know, an opportunity to change because they've had 2 years
Yeah.
to do it.
And is there a precedent in this committee, on, you know, 2 years, but not as long as you, for just to do what Matt just said and say, hey, look, you know, we've heard enough. You bring 10 or 15 people here next time, and
Yeah, we've done that a bunch of
we have all
times.
these.
Almost
and, we've heard enough.
You've been there for those votes.
Sorry, yeah, I know, but we've heard enough. We're not going to approve this.
And on top of that, I mean, all the things that they violated in their previous
But then that
agreement.
was usually tied to a work plan.
No, but even, like, for example,
No,
like,
it's not gonna be-
No, I was just saying, like, even like aside from the noise, like, I mean, this DJ, like the DJ thing, like, that's just all, none of it was done in good faith.
I think even the context in which the liquor license was approved has just been completely violated, beyond just the nuisance that they're causing the rest of the community.
The other logistical component, that's not
That's a word.
well, make it a word.
it's a word now.
At 10
Is
o'clock
that-
at night, anything's a word.
The full board is not gonna meet
What would we do through executive?
yet, so executive then has to
Yeah.
vote on.
Also need the minutes to show.
It's just another
Yeah, so I'm,
small-
so I'm actually inclined not to mediate because I think it's beyond that. And I don't wanna, cause like even if they for some reason were able to do it, like I would still be uneasy about them, even if they were perfect for 3 months. So,
So what you're inclined to do is just to have them come and do
In
the
July.
regular print
Yeah.
pitch.
So
It's gonna be June. Yeah, they're coming in June.
what would we talk to them about in June?
Well, I mean,
Please,
legally,
no.
I mean, I guess, but if you're going to vote on their application,
Alright.
you should,
In
you
June?
should, in June, and hear them in June, you should invite, they're already invited the management, but they might want to bring their attorney and make the
So,
same counter.
alright, so let me counter that. I'd say we call them in June and they say, but we have till July.
Well, you're just saying, we want to discuss things about your renewal, and you could vote however you want, but you should at least give them the opportunity
Yeah, I
in
agree
June.
with that.
No,
with
but I think,
the-
but that's what would happen in July anyway. Like they would come to present their renewal.
But their license, the turnaround is, it doesn't work if they come in July.
Because it has to go to
Because
the board.
your
Or the
meeting
executive board.
is when in July, the last Thursday, and then.
Okay, so they have to show up in June.
Has to.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
so, okay.
So that's actually better for everybody.
Yeah,
So there's
so
no
it's the same thing, yeah.
room for there to be another meeting
Yeah.
where they
They have to come in June, and then if you vote on a resolution, it has to be then, quasi-adopted by exec in the middle of July, and then that's 2 weeks before their license is renewed, and then we send the resolution.
So then what I would suggest to you, is to bring as many people from that, petition as possible. Because, you know,
For the
they're
June
gonna, for the June meeting, yeah, as many people as possible, okay?
Who know about the issue? Speak to it from personal experience.
We're gonna do it, we can't do it.
We do it here, I don't know how many people you're gonna bring, yeah. 35 seats. Well, because you won't all speak, but like you can like speak on behalf of everyone, you know, and just say like, you know, we're all here to oppose this application for blah 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 blah. Also, what I would suggest is taking video of when they're in operation, like with your cell phone or whatever. When they're actually in operation, like don't do like them loitering, like just show like the noise, the open doors, all of that type of stuff.
Time and date stamp on the doors is okay.
And date stamps and times and all that stuff. And as many, like maybe do like every day of the week or something like that, I don't know. Just to show that it's a continuous thing, not a occasional thing.
Do you have development plans for that corner? Is that why the building's empty?
I think we're considering it, but that only became a consideration once we realized, you know, everyone's gone. Because we never thought about it when we had tenants in there.
Are those little buildings part of your plan?
We have.
Would they be?
No, we don't. If we had it, I mean, we'd love to buy them, but we can't. One question I have in terms of the process, the exec board in July, what are the implications of that? In terms of...
Does that have the same standing as a vote as a full?
Yeah, because you have the June meeting.
So full
and then
boards
one
don't meet
was-
over the summer, but our committee meets every month because licenses expire, right? So what we do in lieu of a full board meeting is the executive meeting, which is the chairs of all of the committee and the chair of the board. We vote on resolutions that took place in the one where we don't have full board, and their vote as a whole is representative of the board as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, we basically write a letter. It's per the bylaws of this community board, right? The position of the board is only through resolution. So our letter will say, this resolution passed out of this committee with this vote, was then heard by the executive committee because the full board does not meet until September. And then in September, it will also get voted on as well. So it will be just like ratified, put to a vote. But we still send these things to the state liquor authority.
Yeah, but I would also have, like, give them a heads up that it's so that they're not just coming in thinking it's like a regular.
I don't know, we can do that, right? Then we can tell them what our opinion is.
No, but I can let,
Concerns have been
the
raised.
cover letter for their renewal comes from their lawyer, I can tell, and we
I
don't,
think
we
know
don't.
that there's community opposition to it.
Who's the lawyer?
Because that's
Frank Palillo, he's
he's the big guy, he's always very aggressive.
Does the clock start ticking from the receipt of that?
we have a 30-day window from when it's received.
So are we still within that if we meet in June?
That part really doesn't matter because they sent theirs in way ahead of when their license expires. So we received this on May 13th. They get a certified mail. They get the green card receipt that says we received it on the 13th. And then they can file with the state liquor authority 30 days from May 13th. But their license doesn't expire until the end of July, so they can file with the liquor authority, but the liquor authority's not going to do anything until their current license is, on the verge of expiration. They don't renew people months ahead of time for.
And give them like 2 extra months.
Right. So like maybe a week before their license will expire, they'll process all the paperwork and mail them the license if they were to get a renewed license.
It sounds like we're gonna have an interesting June meeting.
Yes, it does.
Because there's also Tonic is coming. Also,
Oh, Tonic.
because they're up for renewal, and
Tonic.
there are a lot of complaints about Tonic as well.
Is that the other super tall blue bar on that?
That's the red
It's
one.
the one.
That's the red one
it's got
on
a
the
big sign.
25th.
No,
No,
the
you're
one
saying
there.
on the 311.
Oh, I don't
There's
remember.
probably
Yeah.
like 2
What's
towers
their
of blue.
address?
They're
What are they,
on top of
30,
27 or 28.
30th?
Yeah, it's on the corner, isn't it? 28?
They're on the east side.
Yeah, it's
28th and 3rd?
Maybe the.
Oh yeah, that's on the west side.
I'm getting Tonic and there's Gem Saloon mixed up now. Those two.
Gem Saloon's actually pretty good though.
I like the
This
book.
is
Tonic
Tonic.
East, there it is.
Yeah.
Tonic is great.
Yeah.
Gem Saloon is like they organize their lives.
That's
and
right.
everything.
Start
No,
with
Gem
towels.
Saloon's great. They're
Oh
like
my
I miss Radio
goodness,
Bar.
wait, that's
Yeah.
Tonic, that one blue line?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like one of the new.
Well, they have a rooftop.
Yeah, so Tawny had
Yeah.
issues before, like,
Wow.
I was even on this
That's
committee
going
where
on
they
to
had said that they were one
Yeah,
of
the map is not,
being
doesn't
Tawny,
make up.
so.
it can't even pull that. That's how many complaints
That
there
makes
are.
263 look like a gem.
There have been 138 in, since 2017. 138 through
But look, it's dropped since I became chair.
That's
No, because actually we got an email about how they were, what was it SantaCon or St. Patrick's Day, where they weren't as bad.
Yeah.
As, before.
Yeah, well, then we call them in, they didn't show.
I didn't we called Tom again.
I thought we did.
I thought we did too.
We called them
since
in,
I've
they
been
like didn't
here.
show up.
Sorry, yeah, so I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Are you all good?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to finally confirm, next steps for us would be to come in June, they will be here as well. And we would bring as many community members as we could.
As Scott said, as many people familiar with, who can actually.
Think about it like
this
you're
is
presenting your case, so
this
bring
is
in,
effective.
or email the videos to him beforehand, we'll pull it up on here. If there are more people on the petition, keep the petition open.
Yeah.
I am the responding on this petition.
Are you really?
Well, because they only had my email, so it shows my name. I'm like I'm the bad actor here. It's not great.
I was gonna post on the block and around in the neighborhood too, because I think it's only fair to give them an opportunity to speak, and they need to know what the issue is. It might happen, the posting should say, noise complaints, and the renewal of.
Well, see,
When
like,
I
this is what
emailed
I'm.
them, I told them.
Yeah, but this is what I'm confused about, like, any applicant who shows up, they have to do that, like, they have to post, like, everyone that we have.
It's usually just simply a, renewal application. I don't
That's
know.
like they know.
I told them
Yeah.
that I was very vague, but I just said that we're asking you to show up because there are community concerns with this establishment.
Which is the same, you always know.
Yeah.
So,
Very good. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for your time. No, all good. I mean, you guys had to listen for 2 hours, 3 hours, and 3 hours as well.
That's our responsibility.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Alright,
I make a motion to adjourn.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Second.
Alright, so we're 10:01.
Is there anything you guys need from me to, maybe help?
So yeah, just what I said before, if you get more of the petition.